Hey, this is Tempest, and thanks for watching this video. So, I came across the PBBG podcast, episode number 2, a few days ago. The topic of this one was monetization. The podcast, we're going to listen to it. It's an hour long. This video is going to end up being probably an hour and a half or so because I'm going to pause it and give my review and feedback to these developers during the course of this video. The video opens up with the fact that monetization is something in which everyone has a strong opinion about, because this is right at the intersection of business and art, and with games, is it from more of a business side? Are games more about artistic expression? And then right in the middle of that is how we ask players for money. How much we ask them for, how we ask them for money, how we price our games, etc. So monetization is something very, it's got a lot of strong opinions about it. I have a couple of pieces of feedback for this podcast. One, I just want to say before we get started, it would be really helpful for us, the audience, to know who these 3 developers were. Right. Why are we listening to them? Why are we listening to their opinions? What games do they develop? What aspects of those games does monetization touch on? Features or content, cosmetics, etc. What type of monetization they have in there? Are these subscription models, etc.? They want to present this podcast. It's only an hour long. Excuse me. From both the developer point of view and the player point of view. It's a lot of content to fit into 1 hour, especially that I don't know, are we trying to keep this limited to just PBBGs, or are we talking about all game monetization, in the entire industry? So I will say my personal interest would have been a podcast that went a little bit more in depth into this niche, because I can find hundreds of hours of videos talking about game monetization on YouTube. People talking about games and money is not at all anything new, especially in the last couple of years as we start to see more games, Lost Ark, Diablo Immortal, etc. This is not a new topic. These devs, I would love to know a little bit more about them, especially about what they bring to this conversation that's going to be different than AAA games, different than Blizzard, different than other big studios. PBBGs, for the most part, as far as I can tell, and my experience with PBGs over the past, 20 to 30 years, right? These are often one dev or a very small team. It's a completely different part of the games industry. So their take on monetization is going to be different. Their needs of monetization is going to be different. They're not running studios with dozens or hundreds of employees, right? So this is important to introduce at the beginning of say a podcast, so we can set the stage on what exactly we're discussing here. So let's see, what else? I would also say this is going to be a long video. You may not want to listen to it all at one time. I would also say check out the PBBG Discord. The PBBG is something really hard for me to say. The podcast and the Patreon for the PBBG podcast. I think they're planning about 10 episodes. They have a Patreon. We'll touch on it at the end again. Support these guys. I will say from the get-go, because we're about to have strong opinions, what I want to get right out of the way, right out the gate here, is there is no right and there's no wrong. That's not how I want to frame this conversation. What we have is a difference of opinion, and what I would like to do is seek a little bit of clarity on this topic. Everyone is going to be a developer. All these developers have their own agendas, their own interests. There's no universal right or wrong when making a product and asking someone to fund that product, buy that product, fund your development efforts. I will say, I do have a pretty big, I would say, dog in this fight. If you go to my website, slyboots.studio, right? The landing page right there explains exactly why I've made a studio, what my monetization model is. No ads, no microtransactions, no third-party analytics. And that's going to be a big challenge because it means I'm going to more likely rely on either donations or something like a one-time purchase for a game or a one-time purchase for an expansion of content. So, unlike someone who's just maybe a little bit more of a hobbyist, I do have a particular kind of view on this, and I've shaped the entire studio around this particular thing, how we monetize games, much more than, say, the type of game that I'm interested in making. I'm interested in making all types of games that follow, in my opinion, a very ethical monetization model. So without further ado, I will start the podcast, and hopefully the audio here comes in fine.
Welcome, guys. Welcome everybody to the PBBG podcast. This is episode 2. We're going to be talking today about a topic that I'm really excited about because I think everybody has really strong opinions about this, which is monetization. Caleb, did you want to go ahead and kick us off on this one?
Yeah, so I mean, we're just gonna kind of dig into this from a perspective of like a developer, 'cause that's like some of our experience, but also from the perspective of a player and like what kind of games have done monetization well, what are some that maybe haven't. How would you design an ideal monetization system? What are some things that work? What are some things that don't? Pay to win. We're gonna try and dig into all of it today. So
this is really ambitious. They're going to talk about not only monetization in games from a dev perspective, which we could definitely spend a long time talking about that, but also from a player's perspective. I'd like to know, like I said before, a little bit more about what makes these 3 individuals devs, what games have they worked on, how they implemented this, what sort of challenges they've come up with monetization, but also if you're going to shift focus now completely to players, let's make sure we understand what types of players these people are. There's no one on the podcast here that is just a PPBG player that isn't also a dev, right? And you got to keep that in mind. People are talking about PPBG games either funding their hobby, funding their profession, but no one here just for the fun of it. So that could be something perhaps for another conversation or another episode or something like that. Have a bit of a round table, because all of this is going to come down to, in my opinion, when you're a game developer, what is the experience that you're trying to craft for your players? And this is one thing that I wish they would really just touch on a little bit more. I think it comes up just once, but that experience that you as a developer are trying to craft for your players. If you're more on the business side or you're more on the artistic side, you'll probably think about this a little bit differently, right? But it'd be nice to understand what is the mindset of these 3 developers in front of us.
I just kind of wanted to kick it off. We were talking a little bit before the call started about just like monetization and some games that either have it or don't. And I think, Fu, you were saying that Imperial Conflict doesn't have any monetization at all, and you were talking a bit about your reasoning for that. If you want to dig into that a bit.
Yeah, so I've always had a bit of a hesitation because I've had bad experiences as a player before I ever got into the dev world. So when I took it over about 6 years ago, and there was already some kind of pay-to-win mechanisms in place that were kind of like not obvious, but to me, in the purest sense of it, it compromised the competition at least a little bit.
He's had bad experiences. I don't know, we're not going to go into depth about what those were. Money compromising the competition, that absolutely is going to happen, especially when you have games where the competition is something that money can influence. Wish we would talk a little bit more about this, because I feel like this is really the meat of what I'd like to get out of a podcast like this, right? In a PPBG, what is your main game loop? And how are you letting monetization affect that? What is the integrity of your game? And how much are you going to let someone's real life wallet affect that?
So for me, coming into it from that perspective, I decided like I don't want any. I just want it to be pure like money can't affect the competition at all. Maybe we'll sell some, skins for, ships or something. That was my take on it, which, 6 years later, have to acknowledge the reality. Like, yeah, it's a very broke project. I don't make, I've been operating at a loss ever since I took it over. And that's one of the reasons why. So I've had
an excellent point. It's something we got to keep in mind. Just because I'm critical of monetization doesn't mean that games shouldn't be able to make money. They have costs. You have your developer time, your artist's time, asset creation, servers, hosting, marketing, etc. All of this stuff. You can be very altruistic and just want to put it out all there. Open source and completely free. And I don't think there's anything wrong with charging money. And I think the challenge here is to make sure that you have a bit of a business plan. What is your objective, and how are you going to go about meeting that, right? As game developers, we try to meet our goals through the development and sale of games, the sale of entertainment. I think it's important to, you're going to have to change your perspective. Sometimes it starts out as a little bit of a hobby, a passion project, if you will. Those can have different goals for the total amount of money that you're trying to bring in. If you don't make any money, then the game goes offline. So
I've had to kind of soften my stance on that a little bit. Not that I'm, going to start doing, loot boxes all over the place or anything like that, but I do have to confront the reality that it's going to be a difference between keeping the game online or having to say, like, you know what, this was fun, but I can't support this financially anymore. So that's I'm going to have to confront that eventually and figure out where the right balance is for me there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just like anything with any sort of business plan, there's that reality of, how do I keep this online? When do I pull the plug? What do I need to do to try to keep this going? Games, just like any other sort of startup, if your product isn't making money, isn't bringing in users or whatever, you pivot or it dies. So I do think this is an important conversation, and I'll just say, I'll let this play. The conversation shouldn't be so much about that monetization is in games. It should be about the ethical practices and experiences that we're willing to put our players go through, willing to have our players go through for the sake of us getting money from our players. And this is why early on my main feedback for this podcast is figure out who your audience is, and or maybe who your audience is, but what is the scope of this podcast? Your needs and how you are looking at the audience for your game, maybe a smaller community, is very different from how Blizzard is looking at their community, or how some of these bigger games are looking at their community and how they're engaging in this transaction. It is very different. And so this podcast talking about some of how the big guys decide to do microtransactions and how we as PBBG developers do, it's not as relevant or relatable.
Yeah, that's the reality for a lot of devs too. I know, I know several people who just want to make games as a passion project. And when you're putting in your own time and effort as a hobby, it can absolutely be a passion project. But once you get a couple hundred people playing your game, server costs start to go up. You have to spend more time supporting it. People are expecting more from you. And so all of a sudden those scales tip, and it's like, hey, I actually kind of need to make a little bit of money from this to make it worth my while.
Yep.
So, yeah.
How have you approached implementing a system that sustains the project while also not feeling predatory? I guess that's the kind of general conflict I have myself, is I don't want it to feel like it's not fun or like the experience is tainted, I guess.
Yeah. I think for me personally, it's one of the things that helps the most with preventing pay to win, right? Because I think everything on this whole conversation about monetization is a scale. You go from completely free to play, where the game may or may not exist in 6 months because the dev could disappear or it doesn't make money, right? But completely free. And on the other side, you have incredibly predatory monetization models, right?
I mean, regardless of the free to play or whatever, the fact that these PBBGs generally have one dev behind them puts them at an incredible risk for whether the game will go offline or not, right? And if we're going to pretend like that's not making some people hesitate on whether or not to contribute their money, that's also part of the equation. Why would I put in 10, 20, $100 if the game won't be here, right? I buy a Blizzard game, right? I know it's going to be there for years to come. I know updates and patches are going to come. There's a different risk when in investing in someone's hobby project or even a professional one-time dev, right? The moment he comes up with a second project, how is that going to impact his first product? So there are some realities here that you have to keep in mind when you are investing into a developer.
And so I think where we all try and meet is like somewhere in the middle where we're making money from the game and it's something that is honest. We can go to bed at night and feel good about it, but that's still not a clear black and white, like we're over here, So for me personally, one of the things that one of the hard lines that I draw is capping spending. And so that cap isn't necessarily like you can only spend $10, $15, $20 a month. The cap is that you can get, let's say you had unlimited premium currency in the game. There's only so many things you can do with it. You can't just keep spending it forever and ever and ever and getting more and more stuff. And so one of the things that I've done with Elithor is create, like, the main monetization model is VIP, which is essentially a subscription that you can purchase in the game. And it gives you a whole set of, boosts that are like 10 to 15% boosts in various areas of the game. It's definitely like useful, right? It's not like hey, you only get like a skin or something. Like it helps you get ahead. But it's also just a sub, right? You can't level up your sub. You can only get it and have it for a couple of weeks or a month or extend it, and then that's it. You can't keep sinking premium currency. So
either I'm misunderstanding Caleb here, Zala, the developer of Elithor. Either I'm misunderstanding him, or this is not at all entirely correct. So hold on, I'm going to let him finish his statement. He's correct about how the sub works, but not about how pay to win in Elithor works. And this is where I feel like I would like the developers to talk a little bit more about their games.
Personally, that's one of the things that I've done to like curb that pay to win side of things, is like putting a cap on the spending.
There is no cap on spending, which is why if you go to Elithor and go to the number one, like Zortrox or whatever, is way up there, way ahead of everyone else. There may be a limited number of things you can spend on your account with the premium currency, but the fact that you can buy unlimited amounts of premium currency and sell it on the market for gold means that you can then get an unlimited amount of gold and sink that into your equipment, other upgrades for your equipment, other boosts for your equipment, etc. So this is a little bit of a misleading topic, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding it, but Elithor is a game in which there is no cap on the real money transactions to how it can affect your game. There's plenty of things you can buy, maybe not with the premium currency, but you exchange that premium currency for gold, and then all of us, or credits or whatever it is. I refer to it as gold, and then you can buy a number of other things, whether that's the recycle bot upgrades. You can change the gold for ore and do the other recycle bot upgrades. You can on the market you can buy the data chips, which instantly train your masteries, right? So as long as there's a way that my $1 or $10 or $100 or $1,000 can translate into the premium currency, into the non-premium currency, into anything I can buy in your game, there is no cap. So I just want to keep that in mind, that Elithor, by my definition, would be a pay-to-win game, and you can see the leaderboards in that game. It is dominated by people that have paid.
Makes sense. What about you, Ian? You got any particular, experiences from yourself where you confronted that kind of dynamic, I guess?
Yeah, actually, a couple of games that I've had quite a pay-to-win aspect, actually. Crime Block, for one, is actually probably the most pay-to-win game I've worked on. Now, originally when I took it over, I actually didn't want this whole pay-to-win aspect. I wanted to try and remove it. However, the game was entirely built around it. For example, one of the features is, and the game has permadeath, so once you're shot, you basically have to start over again.
Okay.
And one of the things you could buy is bullets. Now, it's not pay to win in the aspect of, oh, you can level up or you get XP, but you could basically put in $100 and wipe a crew.
Huh.
And yeah, that's quite problematic. And I had quite a challenge actually trying to solve this, because I originally released credits without bullet buying, and I got a lot of complaints, like too many complaints, in which I actually had to put bullets back in. Now, previously, you could buy an unlimited amount of bullets, basically however big your wallet is. I did actually implement a cap, so you could only buy 50,000 or 100,000 bullets per day, and that reset at midnight. It's still not a great solution, but it did appease a lot of the players.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the players did get around this by basically using other people's accounts to buy the bullets. But yeah, pay to win, I've had experiences from both ends. And at the end of the day, there are players that want pay to win and there are players that don't. And I think it's a very vocal minority. And I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot here. But it seems like a very vocal minority actually care about the pay to win aspect.
I think that's completely wrong. What I do want to say, and I meant to say it at the beginning of the video, even though I will disagree with certain people's opinions, and I have my own opinion, I do absolutely respect that here's 3 developers willing to talk about the subject, about their own game experiences, and here they are, whether these are hobby projects, professional projects, or whatever, right? There's, everyone's out here doing their thing. I don't feel like anyone's doing anything malicious or anything like that, right? What I will I'll also point out, right, this topic is so ready to be discussed by everyone. The 2 devs so far have said when they took over a game, they wanted to pull out pay to win, right? So I just want to keep that in mind. You have 2 developers that as soon as they got a game, they're thinking, how can I take out the pay to win? And I almost want to dig in and ask them further, is it because for the integrity of the competition of the game, you want to make sure that outside influences such as someone's ability to purchase with their own disposable income, right, whatever your currency is, and compromise the integrity of the game, right? Not that these could be bad games or that these are bad developers or that these are bad models. There's plenty of winning, and we'll talk about what winning is a little bit later. But there are certain things we have in life where we don't want the concept of winning to be influenced by a third party, whether that's a currency or whatever. We want fair play, right? Yeah. So we're just gonna listen to some more of this.
A lot of people just want to play the game.
Yeah, I think that's something that I realized just in general, in gaming in general, having read and heard about all the uproar over stuff like, Battlefront 2 or, other games where it's just like, it's a controversy, but people still buy the games.
Yeah. Oh, and the reason I paused it before is it's a vocal minority. I mean, I would not at all say that it's a minority of players that are bothered by a game. If you honestly put it to people and said, hey, would you like it if games allowed microtransactions in them, right? Do you want the integrity of the fairness of the game influenced? My assumption would be that they would not want a game influenced by money. What these developers, and I'll agree with them, the industry has changed that the offerings for players nowadays are so rife with microtransaction games. Yeah, in order to get this game for free, it's going to come with microtransactions. I don't know if the minority is vocal or not. I don't know. I see every single game that has microtransactions, there seems to be people that are against it. So I don't think that this is a small group of people.
And that's not to invalidate the argument. There's very clear reasons to be upset there. But I think you're right that there's a lot of, maybe a bigger majority of people who might be a little annoyed, but ultimately maybe don't care that much. They just want to have the experience, and that maybe where it's kind of like the outcry is maybe a little overrepresented.
This is where I'd love to differentiate between what a player's experience is and what the developer's expectation was. Are players willing to tolerate it? Were they tolerate a little, friction? Fine. What was the developer's intention? Right? Are you wanting to, and this is why I say what I do about Slyboots. I want you to be able to play a game and be able to immerse yourself in a game and not worry about seeing an ad, seeing a microtransaction, me trying to upsell you on something. If the developer's like, I need to hit this monetary goal and I'm willing to sacrifice my players a better experience for the likelihood of me being able to see an ad, so be it. So there's a balance here, and I would love to hear from the developer's point of view what they're willing to do to compromise their own players' experience, right? Not just what you're willing to tolerate from a player's perspective, but what was your intention?
For good or for worse, maybe it needs to be, but it's not quite the reality necessarily.
That's definitely what I found. I personally don't like the pay-to-win aspects, and I'm working on a couple of games at the moment, and one of the problems I'm coming across is trying to remove the pay-to-win aspect. I'm not sure how it's going to happen, because as a player, I don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy knowing that my account could be shot, for example, and then I'd have to start over just because somebody has more money than me.
Boom.
It's just inherently unfair.
Yeah, that's kind of my own hesitance to it as well, but I do think I've softened up a little bit, because at least with Imperial Conflict, one of the things that we've realized as we go on is that there's a lot of hyper active players that are really putting in hours a day that kind of dominate the game. Okay. So in a way, letting maybe money be something that could tip that balance is actually might increase the fairness, because not everyone has time to dump all that time into it. Yeah. And of course, the people who are hyperactive aren't going to feel that way. They're going to feel like their effort is lost. But it's
sure. If you set up a game in which your progression is based on your commitment to the game, how much you're going to grind, and then if someone's able to catch up, that is the essence of where pay-to-win microtransactions work. It's simple math. If I have a job getting $25, $30 an hour, or if I'm a freelancer for that, for example, and I can choose to work, I can work another hour, get $25, or I can grind at a game. Okay? But with my $25 I just earned by working, if I can buy the equivalent of 4 hours worth of progression, economically it's actually better for me not to play your game and instead buy progression. And even better, the developers are actually on board with this, the bigger developers, because for every hour you play, it's going to cost them server costs, right? But if you're not actually playing and instead doing whatever you need to do for money, and you're just, when you do play, you just buy that progression, you've decreased the amount of server cost. This is where, again, I would love to hear from here. Let me just, let me just rewind it here just a second.
Feel that way. They're going to have time to dump all that time
into
it.
The time.
Yeah. And of course, the people
from the dev's point of view, what is fair? What is the essence of your game? You've just pitted two player types against each other. But you as the developer, what was the intention and the integrity of your game? All right? And the time spent, those people that this has always been an issue, especially with MMOs and stuff like that, where there was a correlation between an amount of time you could grind at a game and ultimately your progression, right?
Who are hyperactive aren't going to feel that way. They're going to feel like their effort is lost. But it's just a balancing act. I think to Caleb's point, the idea that it's a spectrum feels right to me. Like maybe it's not so black and white. It's more like, where do you land on that spectrum?
I mean, if we take a quick step out and you look at companies like Supercell, Clash of Clans, Boom Beach, they are incredibly heavy pay to win, but millions of people play the game.
Yes.
Like, they're a billion-dollar company.
Yeah.
If pay to win was such an issue, the company wouldn't exist.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If pay to win was an issue, the companies wouldn't exist. There are countless companies out there selling shit products, doing deceptive marketing that are absolutely thriving. Just because a bad thing exists doesn't mean that, or just because something is bad doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that's why we call certain types of monetization predatory. And the people that are doing the predatory monetization models are absolutely thriving. In fact, that's one of the biggest challenges as a developer is to maintain your integrity versus like, well, let me just make a virtual casino, because you will absolutely make money with that. That's why this is such a contentious issue. Whether it's casinos and gambling, whether it's fast food, whether it's low quality products, just because it's lucrative doesn't mean it's ethical. It's questionable whether or not it's even socially acceptable. But I think this is the big difference here. When you look at who's developing Clash of Clans and like games, Diablo Immortal and stuff like that, you're talking about games with player bases into the millions, hundreds of thousands and into the millions. And that is not the PBBG audience. Who, by the way, and so you have two very different parts of the games industry and how those companies and how those products interface with their communities, right? Is there a sense of, do I know the Clash of Clan developers? Do I get that same, do I know who they are? Can I chat with them on Discord? When I play the game, do they show up, right? Is there sort of that sort of like whatever? Are they Patreon founded, right? As opposed to Elithor, where I know on the PBG Discord, Caleb and I have talked about Laravel and PHP, right? There's a whole different other vibe you get over here with the small time developers, the hobbyist developers and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I would just say just because it's big and just because people engage in it doesn't mean that it's good. It's exploitive gambling, right? It's exploiting some human weakness, some weakness we have in ourselves with kind of the Skinner box model, with dopamine hits in our brains. Why gambling? Even though we know it's wrong, right? We keep doing it, right? And there's people that are going to take advantage of that. And so that's where like this whole podcast thing, I think, is, you got to figure out like what the scope of this thing is, because we could just talk about that for an hour, but there's 100 other hours on YouTube about this. I'd love to talk a little bit more about just like what's affecting the PBBG community, right? Because by and large, they haven't put in gambling in these games. There's no loot boxes, and I would love to hear from these three developers as to why. Are you guys okay with gambling, right? Are we going to cross that ethical boundary, especially with games that only have hundreds or thousands of players? So anyway,
it's true. I remember some mobile game I was playing. I don't remember the title. It was a zombie themed survival game, and I played it like daily at least for a good couple of weeks before it finally hit me like, oh, I can't really compete because the paid players have all this sweet gear, and I'm going to get my butt kicked all the time. But then I thought, it's still fun. I'll still play it once in a while. So even myself, it's like, as much as I think, conceptually that I don't like it, when it comes down to it, I don't know if I really, care that much if the game is fun enough,
Yeah. And if that's the price that you're paying to be able to play the game for free, like, is it worth it, And for a lot of people, I would say it is. Like, you were saying, Ian, that a lot of people, there was an outcry when you removed pay to win because they really like that. And for most people, they probably don't care too much. I mean, it's unfortunate when your account gets shot, right? Because someone else has a bigger wallet than you. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you're getting to play this game absolutely for free because other people are paying, right? Like, there's just the reality that I think a lot of people are aware of and maybe don't want to vocalize because the vocal minority is so outspoken that pay to win is the worst thing to exist in the world. But yeah, I felt the same way. Like I felt like there's games that I play like
I don't think it's the worst thing to be in the world. I think though there are some people that enjoy the like pure competition on skill, right? And what you've just said, what's been happening here for the last minute or so is basically people saying, I'm willing to take a worse experience because I can get it for free. I mean, I'm not going to name any like specific news networks out there, but there's real journalism. And then there's what we have on some of these channels. And it's because it's been influenced by money, right? Do we care about that? Are we willing to tolerate it? Just because a lot of people aren't completely up in arms when they want a few minutes of entertainment and are willing to download a game in which the top of all the leaderboards is dominated by people willing to spend $1,000, doesn't necessarily. I mean, that to me, that's not necessarily a good thing. It's a reflection of where we are as a society. You as a game developer also get to decide what type of entertainment you're putting out there and what type of game you're going to have. What I'm seeing is a lot of people which ethically I would not agree with, integrity-wise I would not agree with. They have figured out a model in how to trick people to give them money. And I will say trick. I have a background in marketing, social games, these types of games that have taken advantage of people. I've helped develop the game engines for this. I've helped brands put this stuff into place. I know what I'm talking about. It is a way of separating you from your money, designing that sort of, that is the objective of the game, right? So, yeah, people are willing to tolerate some shitty experiences. Yeah. This is not a surprise.
Like there's kingdom builders, on mobile that are just absolute pay to win trash. Like to be completely honest, and I love it. Like I really do. All the timers and getting zeroed and zeroing other people and picking on people smaller than you. Like I have zero chance of ever competing against some of these people that just spend $50 to $100 a day to just stay at the very top. And I don't really care. Like I get to play a really fun game and I get to check in regularly and be a part of a group and. Like I will never be number one, but the price of never being number one is still worth it for me to play the game.
An excellent point. And now we've shifted from them talking as developers over to players. I wish that was a cleaner cut. I wish this was two different podcasts so we could hear just from the dev perspective and then just from the player's perspective. What we're hearing from players is pretty much just like, I don't mind that there's pay to win players. What I'd love to have in this call is a whale. Give me someone that's actually, get the top player of any of these guys' games. Give me their top guy. Give me the guy that spent $10,000, $20,000 in IQ RPG, and let's interview that guy, right? If you want to talk about monetization in this genre, let's talk about it with the people that are engaging into it. There's, the peasant, right, in IQ RPG that hasn't spent anything, but I've X-traded, right, cross-traded. And then there's people that are dumping $10,000, $20,000 into it, right? So, yeah, there's many, many perspectives here.
Game. And I think a lot of players probably feel that same way too.
Yeah, I think it comes down to managing expectations.
Sure.
Like if you come into an experience thinking like what the deal is, you know what you're going to get out of it, you adjust your experience accordingly. You're not going to be surprised, I guess. So maybe it's a little more tolerable.
This is why I love playing indie games and games typically by one dev. Yeah, we've come to accept shitty games from a lot of developers. Right? Like, yeah, they're free, but they're shitty experiences, guys. I'm looking for something a little more like ethical and people designing a game for the sake of a game. And this is just me.
I was just reading about was it Diablo Immortal, the mobile one?
Yeah.
And how there was like a split view on that, and the old players, the non-mobile players who grew up with it, of course they're going to be upset because they had different expectations. But the players who come from the mobile world who are already used to it, maybe you're like, oh, what's the big deal? It's kind of how games are nowadays.
Yes and no. Yes. If it was your first experience into just mobile gaming, coming from PC gaming, that was a little bit disruptive. Diablo Immortal, if you look at the actual controversies, was perhaps some of the most exploitive stuff to upgrade your character. There's plenty of videos out there, examples, people spending $20,000, $10,000 for like just a few of the upgrades to max out the account. I believe it's like 6 figures. If we're not addressing the fact that you can dump $50,000 into Diablo Immortal, whereas yes, Diablo 2 cost me 40 to 60 back in the day, like this is just a stupid conversation. Like holy crap, what are we doing? And this is where it's like this podcast is talking about fucking Diablo Immortal, where there's massive issues there. We've become accustomed to like accepting that the fact that there's just not outrage that this is tolerated in the games industry, and that this isn't just like a casino now. Like yes, the game looks good, yes they have good animations, but okay, yeah.
So
yeah.
maybe it really depends on
who
your market
just
is, or who you're catering to, but also just in general, the general expectation as gamers to whether or not how that's going to be a problem, it's going to exist. It's not like it was 20 years ago. You buy a Nintendo game and then you unwrap it and that's it. Like the environment has evolved a lot. I think
yes and no.
Despite the outcry, and it's not to forgive predatory practices or anything. I just think it's not quite so simple to think pay to win is bad necessarily. I think maybe it's a matter of implementation or how it's how the expectations are set for the player.
Absolutely, expectations for the player's point of view, but also the developer. And I guess this is from the developer point of view. 10-20 years ago, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon cards, right? This is pay to win. This is where I can buy the better card for money. I can buy more cards for more money to increase my chance. I mean, Magic the Gathering cards are loot boxes. Yeah, you have a chance at a rare and 3 uncommons and the rest are common and stuff like that. Like, so it is expectation. I guess that's what I think is the biggest issue here. People are growing up. Imagine if we could play a game of baseball. Imagine if you're watching baseball and the batter's about to strike out, but guess what? The team has donated $10,000 and now we're just going to wipe away one of those strikes. Or maybe we can just pay for a runner on first. Maybe we could pay $1 million for a runner on second. Why not? We have to fund the team some way, right? The stadium costs money, right? And what if some of these like tennis matches or golf, what if Tiger Woods could pay to lower the total score and perhaps win the tournament? What if Serena Williams could pay to redo a match against somebody? What if we played a game of baseball, but I could pay to decrease the amount of distance between the bases, so my runners and just my runners had to run less than the other team? We grow up and understand that in games there is or should be some inherent fairness. Yes, it is all about expectations. And what we are now seeing is developers put out games that no longer represent fair play. And they're not taking ownership of that enough. And the critics, people, like they said, the vocal minority. These people are talking about games that are no longer fair. If you have a pay-to-win game, you may be fine with that. I would say your game is not fair. And that may be fine. That's my opinion. And my opinion is that if you're going to do that with a game, own it. Own the fact. Like, I got into a thing maybe over the last year with another developer who was just, he made his game pay to win and was also trying to say that wasn't a problem at all. And I'm like, but you have leaderboards and you're trying to present yourself in this non pay to win way, but it clearly is. So anyway, yes, it is about players' expectation and what they're willing to tolerate. And you're seeing people have an issue with this because the nature of games themselves are changing. It's the same reason why journalism from decades ago and what people's issue with journalism now, or at least those that represent themselves as journalism, and why they're, there's a difference here. Something has changed from the expectation I had decades ago to what I see now. Same with, say, politicians and their behavior, right? That's why we have issues and why people have strong opinions about this.
Yeah. So a lot of what we're talking about is, the microtransaction monetization model, like having a free-to-play game that you purchase premium currency or boosts or bullets or gems or whatever it looks like. But there's also some other ways to monetize games too that I think are maybe underdeveloped or less explored than they should be. And so I know one that a lot of players that hate pay to win always go to is the buy to play, right? The idea of you buy a Nintendo game, you unwrap it, that's it. You get the entire game in one package. And that's one example. Another example is like an ad-driven game. So like, I think we talked last episode about how like our first browser games that we got into, and one of mine was RuneScape. And the game was free to play for most people. You could buy a sub. But on the free-to-play version, they had ads on the top and the bottom of the screen that would refresh every 5 minutes or whatever. And I'd spend hours there, so who knows how many times I was looking at ads, And then also just like a sub model too, World of Warcraft or EVE Online or RuneScape, and a lot of these bigger games have a sub model where you just pay a flat fee monthly, and then once you pay it, you get the entire game unlocked, and that's that. So have you guys seen any of these other models in the PBBG space, like being done well or maybe being done less optimized?
So this is good to keep in mind. Going back to the baseball example, you can watch baseball for free. Well, not quite for free. There are commercial breaks, right? So it's ads. Same with the radio. You can listen to a baseball game on the radio. You're going to hear ads, sponsors, stuff like that. You can listen to music on the radio. You're going to see ads, right? That is the monetization model that funds those services. They're not entirely free. Wikipedia, for example, free except for when they run the fund drive where they're trying to raise money, like most non-profits like NPR and stuff like that. There'll be a few days or weeks or whatever, and they try to raise funds, right? So there's lots of different ways to gather revenue. New World, I think it's about $40. New World from Amazon Game Studios, $40 one-time purchase, and then that's it. The game after that is free, and it's an online MMO. So lots of different options out here. I will say, I've played EVE many years ago. EVE had a subscription model. WoW nowadays is different. WoW has a subscription, and it has where you have to pay for the game, or at least the content expansions and stuff like that. It also has a store, like I'm not going to call them microtransactions. Like you can buy mounts and cosmetics, right? And I guess to a certain extent, so does New World. So WoW has many different ways to get people buying. It's not just one and done.
So it's been a while since I checked, so I'm not sure how accurate this information is anymore. But Phosphorus Universe, when I signed up, I saw that there was some kind of pass system, some kind of access unlock, which I thought was pretty cool. I don't often see that so much in our space, but it was interesting to see. I guess a sense of confidence. It seemed like they knew what they were doing. They had their idea or their head around a model that they wanted to pursue. I don't know how much that's worked for them or if it's been a success or not, but I mean, it made sense to me when I was looking at it. It's like, all right, you get you don't get it all up front. You got to have to put something up for it. It made sense, I think.
Yeah. That's cool.
Idlescape does something a little bit different. And they basically have donations. They're entirely donation run at the moment. I know in the future they intend to change that. But what happens when you donate at the moment is if you donate $5, then the entire server gets 20% XP bonus for 5 minutes. So it no longer means that whoever has the biggest wallet gets the bonuses. Everybody does. They share in the wealth.
It's a very fair game to do it that way.
I love that kind of system because it's like I feel like it's exciting. Like as a player, it's like, there's an upgrade on the table if we put in for it, and then everyone's going to get the boost. That's a really nice model.
That's true.
It's a really nice model, but it's really hard to motivate people to work together towards a goal in a game, right? To be like this. Usually someone needs a little of incentive. IQRPG gives the global boost, but also gives premium credit to the person that put the money in. So it's nice, right? We all say thank you to the person who just bought the advantage in the game. It's a wonderful way to trick the community into being okay with the premium currency. That person just got all that credit, just got a huge advantage. But man, we got some bonus experience. We're all winning now, right? So just keep that in mind.
Unfortunately, with donations and how they're completely voluntary, it's not sustainable.
I disagree, but
I know
in this case it may not be sustainable, but there's plenty of people out there that ask for donations. I already talked about Wikipedia. There's plenty of nonprofits out there that have been sustainable asking for donations, right? And so now this would be interesting to, again, if the podcast was just about PBBG. How well are we as developers, marketers, and salesmen? And this is the challenge when we are one-person teams or two-person teams. There's a lot of stuff that goes into keeping a product or a service live. Rarely can one person do all these things well. And when you don't do something like game balance well or marketing well, then you don't get income, right? Or game balance, then the game's unfair.
How much they bring in, I wouldn't share that. But it's not a sustainable model. And they have 73,000 registered users.
Okay.
They have between 1,900 and 2,100 users on.
Okay. About 2,000 people
at any one time.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, getting people to donate is still a challenge.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's definitely the
$2,000 players is an incredibly small pool. It's why when we talk about microtransactions and why they talk about some of these bigger guys, Clash of Clans, your conversion rate for a game, I remember back in the day with Facebook games, only 1% to 2% of your entire player base is contributing anything. So for 2,000 people, what is that? Sorry, I'm going to try to do this. 20 people? If this was a microtransaction game, you'd probably have 10 to 20 whales? Yeah.
Yeah, an unfortunate reality is that it's nice to ask people, but some people will be great and you might get, even big donators, and that's always awesome, but it's not quite, like you're saying, sustainable. It's kind of it needs to be maybe a little more baked into the system and maybe more, not such I want to say asking for a handout, but maybe asking for hey, please, if you like it, it really helps us out, be a favor. I think that kind of pitch maybe it's nice when it works, but it doesn't seem like it works.
This is what my studio is doing. We're going to try to do some stuff with content expansions. Aside from that, I'm going to ask people, hey, you like this game? Fund the Patreon. It's not going to influence the game itself. You're going to fund the game studio. It's totally a risk. I don't know that it's going to work, but I definitely know that I want to try. So, yeah, I absolutely acknowledge the difficulty here.
To scale,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different space, but the Twitch streaming world too. Maybe a year or so ago, there was a huge uprise. I don't want to say uprise. There was a bunch of big streamers that basically were saying, "Hey, stop donating onto the channel." People who were donating to get screen time or get their message played on the screen. It was just stop doing that. You're throwing your money away. People were doing it in order to get their own message up on the screen and kind of have their 5 seconds of fame or whatever. But streamers were saying basically the amount of money that I make from your donations is less than 1% of my total income because of sponsorships and Twitch partnerships and all the other things that end up making them money. And I think the same probably would be with games too, right? If you say, hey, can you please donate some money? Yeah, you're going to get people who will donate and think that's a great monetization model. But it's going to be a very, very tiny percentage of the people who would actually pay for some kind of in-game benefit or a boost or whatever that looks like. Yeah.
Sure. Some people, and I'll flash the Bartle test here. We're going to talk about this later, about what motivates people. Very little is you don't achieve what you're basically saying. Hey, can I have here's money for absolutely no benefit in the game. So there's no motivation there by people who want that. I think the Twitch conversation's a little differently. A lot of the controversy with Twitch is about the rev cut. So a lot of people donate to the streamer thinking they're giving $5 to the streamer when in fact they're only giving $2.50, right? When you're taking 40% cut or 50% cut or whatever it is that Twitch is taking. And so there is some issue there. And so people were like, hey, I know you want to give me $5. Really, you're just giving me $2.50. You're giving Twitch the other $2.50. Keep your money. I'm getting enough through other means. So I don't think the Twitch example here is a great example of donating and why folks may or may not want to. I think there's plenty, like, for example, the Patreon here for just getting this podcast done is a great example of it. Maybe you get a shout out at the end, right? Maybe you get a thank you for funding it, right? But there are countless examples of people willing to fund small projects, and sometimes medium-sized projects, $1 million projects, just to see that idea come to life. So donating can work, but just like there is a range of, just by adding monetization does not mean you make money. There are plenty of people who have tried to put in microtransactions that don't know how to balance microtransactions or make their game fun. Asking people for money and giving nothing but a thank you in returns takes skill. So I think that, that could take some refinement and development.
Yeah. Well, ideally, you'd be able to set up something where you diversify your channels. You have multiple coming from all angles, and
there you go.
Donations are still valuable, but you have ads, or you have a subscription or whatever on top of skins. Without going crazy, without chopping it up so much that the players can feel it. I guess that's the challenge as designers, to figure out how to do all that kind of stuff in a way that's doesn't get in the way. I don't know if I could think of any games off the top of my head that do it so well that it feels seamless, but it's you could definitely tell when that's not the case, where it's like, oh man, it's a chore,
poorly
implemented. I can't. It just feels like
anything.
I have to not pay to play, but pay to even try to play. Like everything's behind some kind of locked paid mechanism.
Yeah, I think a game that I was thinking of that does a good job of buy to play is Melvor Idol. I know it's not necessarily squarely in our space because it's a single player game, but that game is it's free to play on web, and you pay for the app. So the app is like $10, I think. It's not.
They have a free app.
They do? Okay, nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's powered by ads, I believe, but then you can upgrade to a one-time payment, and you get the pro version.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, there's no microtransactions in the game at all because it's single player, so it kind of there's not a competition level to it. I know people still spend money on single player games, it's wild to me, but yeah, so that's their main monetization model, and they've done super well with that. And there's also, I think he has a pay
plenty of single player games in which people like to brag about this, that, and whatever, and achievements and stuff like that. Understanding players and what keeps players interested. You can make a single player game with microtransactions and be successful. Not every game needs to be a competition in the game about stuff. People brag all the time about things they've done in games with their friends. You're still achieving the same, hey, I got something that you don't. Yeah.
Patreon, even before Jagex picked them up, that people would sub to his Patreon just to get access to a test server so that they could see what he was doing ahead of time. So again, not pay to win at all, but he had thousands of people who were paying $5-10 a month just to be part of the secret club that got access to the behind the scenes stuff. So another really interesting idea that can work at scale. I don't know if it would work in a smaller game. I don't think Elithor could probably.
This works incredibly well with smaller communities, though, right? That pay for access, that specialness. I'm involved in funding this game. I am somebody in this community. Absolutely. This stuff at a smaller scale, the Patreon, excuse me, kind of the credits, the thank yous, the in the know. This is the thing, right? You see people all the time when they get to be staff on a game. They're like, oh my God, I got that special title, that special thing next to my chat name. Ooh, and all of a sudden you see them as a separate tier of players within a game. Ooh, it's a GM or something like that. It's incredibly motivating, right? I give Blizzard whatever it is a month for World of Warcraft. I feel like my money just went into a giant pool at Activision Blizzard, and now, which is owned by Microsoft. Like, they didn't need my money to keep this game running. If I was to give that equivalent to one of these devs, I do feel like the impact of my contribution would be much greater, right? And so to be part of that is something that I think small indie devs could absolutely tap into. It's, yeah.
We do well with that kind of model, but when you've got, hundreds of thousands of people with eyes on your game, I think that could be a really sustainable model.
Oh yeah, that's really. Oh, good.
Sorry, he also doesn't have to pay for servers or anything, because as you said, it's single player. So his outgoings are literally just him and the developers that he paid.
Just by comparison cost. I know this often comes up. Oh, it's a single player game. They don't have a back end, so they don't have to pay for servers. If anyone's paying the equivalent for server costs for what they're paying a developer's full time, then you've got a problem. Like, paying a developer, if anyone's paying, whatever, I'm just thinking now, like a decent developer, like 70,000 to 100,000 a year. If you're paying that in server costs, you're doing something wrong. There's plenty of other things that are going to cost you stuff aside from the back end.
If he does.
That's pretty cool. What was I gonna say? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought of that.
Especially for a game like IQ only is running nearly 400 people online at a time. Like, that is not a robust, expensive server. It's just not.
Sorry, I'll remember it later.
All good. Have you guys seen any games do ads well?
Only mobile games. So. I don't really recall any browser-based games that really run ads.
No.
The ones that I've seen are just typically, basic Google ads or something. Yeah. Nothing that stands out as, interesting, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about doing something like a sponsorship type deal, or you get to be the main name, like Elithor's, this month is run by whoever, and you pay X dollars to be the sponsor. But sure. I feel like it's difficult, especially in our space, to who would want to spend that kind of money for a sponsorship slot? What does our demographic of players really have that makes it worthwhile or valuable? Game ads are pretty cheap as far as cost goes, and ROI and stuff.
So this is the tricky part of this conversation. The reason why ads on mobile and ads in social games, and what he's talking about, sponsorships, fundamentally different types of players, right? Ads work by impressions, right? So on Facebook, when you do a game like Farmville and you're showing your game to literally 100,000, 500,000, a million players a day, a million different people a day seeing that ad. If they click on the ad, great. If they don't click on the ad, fine. You are making revenue. You just served up a million, and because of Farmville, it's got timers and stuff. Maybe those million people came back 3-5 times a day. You just served up 3 million ads. The trouble with with the smaller game devs, and there's one I'm not going to mention. He tried to do ads, it didn't work, and he tried to do video ads and whatever. It's about impressions and volume. He's got a game with 20 active users, and he's doing video ads, and then he's distressed that he only made something like 6 cents, and it's yes, because the monetization model you're trying to facilitate is one that really gets going when you have 10, 20, 100,000 people visiting your website, right? This is why websites that do high traffic, why they show ads, right? CNN or whatever, they show ads because they're pulling in millions of views, and so that works, right? The same thing with what he just mentioned about sponsorship. So in games, it's called an offer wall. Right. Basically, you should be able to I can click an ad and get currency, or I've got a wall of offers. You don't see it too much nowadays, but it used to be popular back in the day of social games. Cross-pollination. I'd see a wall of offers. Maybe I'm playing Farmville, but I want to go over to Mafia Wars. If you get a level 3 character in Mafia Wars, you'll get rewarded in Farmville X amount of currency or X amount of prize, right? So you get a wall of offers that lead you over to other games. What you're doing here is selling traffic, and you're buying traffic. Facebook had a pool of millions of users that they were funneling to one game, to the other game, to the other game. I don't know that the PBBG community has that volume of players that will go from one to the other, right? It also works. It works on mobile well too, because people get bored of a title and then they are looking for something else to sink their time into. With long-term idle games, you're not getting bored after just a few hours, days, or even a couple weeks of playing a game and then quitting it, right? PBBG's, we're playing Idle Quest here since for the 3 years it's been online. Like, I'm not, I'm trying Elithor, I'm doing Queslar, but we're not moving 100,000 people from one title to another. And I think that's where this whole conversation about monetization it's not enough to do in this time. Like, these strategies and tactics work in certain situations and don't work in others. And we're not digging in this conversation. Why? Why aren't we seeing ads? Why aren't we seeing sponsorships? Why? Why are certain things not working and others are? Right? If Blizzard did a Patreon for help fund World of Warcraft, how many people are going to feel like they're part of the creative process there at Patreon as opposed to a smaller indie dev, right? Different strategies are working for different games at different scales.
Yeah, that just did remind me of something we used to have in Imperial Conflict. It wasn't directly a sponsorship or an ad kind of thing, but I saw potential for it. So in our game, we have a bunch of planets. It's a space themed game.
Yeah.
And for people who bought the VIP pass at the time, this is before Patreon, they spent $10 every 3 months for a VIP pass, and they could name the planets.
Cool.
And I always thought that'd be really cool if every individual planet is pretty much real estate, a billboard. So $1 gets you, you could name this whatever you want, times that by 3,000 planets in the round or whatever, and just see who bites. You never know. Yeah, I feel like there's other games that have some kind of representation of territory for any 4X game or any other game where that's the game world is maybe dynamic and changing hands. I feel like that could be kind of I could see that being something that players would be interested. I would be interested as a player if I joined some random game, had fun for a couple of months, thought, you know what, that's mine. I'm gonna put, this is the Fuhan Pai country or whatever. I could definitely see people getting into that.
Different players.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Different motivations.
So let's
sell
say
them different
we are
things.
Creating a brand new game from scratch. How would you ideally design an excellent monetization system for the game?
An excellent question. Now, what I want to hear is one of these devs say that they care about the user experience, and they don't. At least the way I want them to say it, and that's my own expectation and disappointment. But that is where I'd like to see the conversation go. He just asked, how do we design a monetization system, right? How are we going to impact the user experience? What is the story I am telling with this game?
Good question.
I'm kind of living this right now, so I'm trying to pick your brains too.
I'll go first because I have the least amount of experience, so this should be interesting. I feel like something that I've always wanted to do is obviously skins, but on everything possible. And I'm sure games have done this, but you have an avatar. Okay, well, you could have any customization for whatever you want your character to look like, any weapon that you're going to use.
Socializers.
That's
huge
where my
here
first
for the cosmetics.
That's actually sounds the most fun to me, even though it doesn't have any impact on the game itself. I feel like players really, really get attached to their identity.
It depends on what you're defining as the game. If all 4 of those quadrants are experiences people can have in my virtual world, it affects the game. What he's talking about is commonly what we think about the actual main game loop, not the full experience someone will have, but the main game loop. Cosmetics don't affect that. The performance of the character in combat, right? Or the speed of the car of a racing game, fine. How it looks, but you can win in all 4 categories, right? Me having that better looking, more rare cosmetic absolutely counts as winning to some people. And I will say the means in which someone gets the cosmetic also affects the implied value, right? Earning or finding a completely rare mount or cosmetic as opposed to buying it reflects differently.
In a game, it's really important. I don't know. I want to say it's a vanity thing. I just think maybe it's more of a validation thing.
It's both.
Like you're investing your time into this experience. It's a social game, especially, and just having representation that this is what I look like. I'm not just another random user ID in a database table somewhere. I have a personality. There's role playing aspect. That kind of stuff is where my head goes to first.
Sure.
I don't know if that would be the most profitable, but as a player, that sounds the most fun.
Yeah, cosmetics are incredibly profitable, especially because most players actually agree with the way he just presented it. This isn't going to impact the game, but it allows me to customize my representation, my avatar, my uniqueness in this virtual world. I want to express myself. I want to appear different than others. It depends on the type of game, but also regardless of how much money I spend in this area, to be good at the game is a completely different skill. And so people don't mind, and the connotation of unlike Diablo Immortal or Lost Ark, where you're paying for essentially increased opportunities to improve your gear, the cosmetics are simply self-expression, right? And so collectively we view that a lot less. Imagine like a baseball team that can afford a more expensive player versus a baseball team that simply bought organic cotton uniforms, right? So, yeah. Or it has a fancier logo or even a fancier stadium, right? The fancier stadium that doesn't affect the baseball pitch at all, right? Cosmetically. Okay. I will be right back. Let's see. Just a couple things from the Discord chat. Let's see. I don't think you misunderstood it. I understood it the same way. Had the same consideration. Oh, this is back on the topic of Elithor. Still very much pay to win, though it's dampened down to some extent due to the transfer of VIP to the remaining player base, thereby contributing to their increased progression. I covered that specific approach in my blog recently. Okay, I need to read that blog. But you're 100% right. There's no cap on spending. Okay. On the subject of people are willing to tolerate some shitty experiences, I think it's not always true when you have pay to win where you have a top portion of players completely dominating the leaderboards. It only goes wrong when you start pivoting the two groups up against each other, as Swampai mentions with the zombie game. Most pay to win games do have that competition because the microtransactions work well when you are saying, hey, I can pay to bully you. Like, the killer motivation is the PvP, right? Achievers, leaderboards, right? If you can pay, like, it's interesting, a lot of these games have leaderboards, whether they're Queslar, Elithor, IQRPG, but those leaderboards are interesting, but those leaderboards are also can be influenced by paying. So there is some PvP there. It only goes wrong when you start pivoting the two groups up against each other. Well, that I think is the problem, right? When it starts to go wrong, right? It'd be interesting to have. It'd be interesting to look at games that have microtransactions that do not have any sort of player competition at all. In the zombie game we played, where you can pivot the paid players up against each other, and the free-to-play, you can still design a game even when the player playing for free can have an enjoyable experience. Yes, there can be enjoyment. There's of course in enjoyment. We can all go out for a burger, and we all may not be able to afford the deluxe amazing burger, but we still get a nice hamburger and we still call it enjoyable, right? That's fine. I think within the realm of arena sports, like a game of soccer, all those players are on that field for X amount of time, right? And the only difference between all those 22 players on that field is their individual skill, and we consider then that a fair game. The moment you would allow any other monetization to affect, maybe someone can start off with the ball, maybe someone can take a penalty shot, maybe I can pay for the soccer goal to be bigger or smaller. That's the sort of thing that game developers are allowing to happen in their games. And we're just sort of shrugging our shoulders and just saying, well, but we need to make money somehow. It's like, fine. But then own the fact that the integrity of that fair competition has been compromised. And I get it. Everyone needs to pay for development. Absolutely. Even when the person playing for free can have adding games when it requires either skill or brains, and suddenly you start to see free-to-play players taking on paid players and winning, and that makes it even more enjoyable for the free-to-play player. Of course, sure. And so there are, for lack of better words, edge cases where I could... So, Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone, right? These are games that can be free-to-play. I like Hearthstone. There's only... In Magic the Gathering, there is essentially a limit, sort of, in how expensive that deck can be. And if you grind Hearthstone and earn the craftable currency and earn the packs and whatever, you can have a good deck and you can win. Your skill, those things are free to play in the fact that it can influence what card you put into your deck. But why I love Magic and why I love Hearthstone and why I love, being able to play that game well. Also, knowing when to increase your board threat versus hold back opportunities in your hand. The highest level of like Magic and Hearthstone players are those that can play the psychological angle. Am I bluffing with what do you think I have in my hand? What am I not playing? What are you holding back? You thinking that I have a counter for, etc. So yes, this is a complicated topic. It's worth talking about. Everyone's opinion here is valid. Everyone's experiences are valid. The difficulty is that they're fitting it into 1 hour, and we seem to be talking about the entire games industry.
Yeah. So kind of like a cosmetics microtransaction type system.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's where I think I'm most excited for as a player when I see it in other games. That I do like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go along the similar veins. I recently built an avatar builder for a game that probably won't be released anymore, but it allowed customization of like all your accessories, your pants, your shoes, socks, whatever.
Yeah.
Like every piece is customizable, and the idea would be that we can then sell any amount of accessories or color schemes or whatever to the player. But as to your original question, a battle pass.
Okay.
Similar to the likes of Valorant. Because I enjoyed that progression. Yeah, it costs $9 a month or whatever, but it gives you more of a reason, I guess, to log in. Like for that $9, you then get a whole bunch of missions which is decently done, and you get a variety of rewards. You get like in-game currency, you could get emotes, you could get skins. There's a whole bunch of different things you could get. Valorant, I think, has 50 levels to it, and the final level is basically unlocking the knife from like the new collection. And it's easily obtainable for any casual gamer. You play 2 or 3 games a day, and you'll be able to get there by the time the battle pass runs out. I think that's the way I want to go, at least with my games. It allows not a pay-to-win aspect, even though, by doing the missions you might get like extra XP. But it gives everybody the chance to do it.
Sort of. So how I've seen Battle Pass implemented, Hearthstone has one, so like with a few other games. I like the idea that there is something that's not just like a subscription where you pay and get the benefit, nor a microtransaction where you pay and instantly get the buff. The Battle Pass, as I've seen it done, you actually have to play the game, and at certain milestones, you will, unlike when your character levels up, you will get a reward. If you pay for the premium battle pass, you get essentially 2 rewards. You get the free one and the paid one. I would still consider it pay to win because you're still rewarding based off money. But I do like the fact that it's requiring folks to play the game, that you're not giving all the loot, all the benefit at once just from a real money transaction. And it dips into the motivation of completionists for like achievements and daily quests. It brings people back to your game. A battle pass from a user retention point of view is a wonderful mechanic. Get people to come back time and time again. People, and I think it's going to come up a little bit later, but this idea of you paying for the subscription and you're like, I could play, I could not play today, right? But the battle pass is like, hey, if I play, I'm going to get this other thing. I'm not going to get this benefit unless I play and unlock it. It's still pay to win. But I think I think that's a fine idea.
So I'm not too familiar with that game in particular. Is this just kind of like a general content unlock kind of thing, where you could just you could get in and have a baseline experience, but if you're into that. If you're paying for that battle pass, you get access to a whole opening of that world. Is that kind of thing?
Yeah, a little bit. League of Legends also does it. League of Legends does it in quite a different way, though. How it actually unfolds a story alongside being able to get skins or wards or whatever from it.
Interesting.
I think Fortnite did it like a long time ago too. I don't know if they were the first one to do it. But yeah, just as you play the game, you get experience, you level up your battle pass, and you get free rewards, just for leveling it up. But if you buy like the premium battle pass version, you get like 5 times as many rewards and an experience boost and like bonus missions to do.
So it's pay to win, but
stuff like that. And those rewards are usually like cosmetics, but they can also be like additional experience or some things that probably would be considered pay to win if they were just straight up purchasable, but because they have to be earned through the battle pass, a lot of players have no problem with it because it's generally accessible to everybody. So
cool. So it's like
that sort of argument right there is why I would love to hear this podcast from the difference between the player perspective and the dev perspective. To say no one has a problem with it, no, let's be clear. We just snuck in pay to win with people not objecting because we've clouded it with you have to at least earn the purchase, right? I think it's fine. I'm not making an argument that the Battle Pass is wrong or anything like that, but let's recognize the difference between the Battle Pass approach and the straight up microtransaction thing. It's very similar to like when games sell like an hour of bonus experience. You still have to do something with your time in order to get the bonus experience. You have to earn the experience to get the bonus experience. But yeah, and so the Battle Pass perspective from both a player point of view and a dev point of view is a good topic. I do like the idea that we may be moving more to a Battle Pass thing. I like how it's been presented in games so far. I love the fact that Battle Passes aren't just for premium players. In a lot of games that have a store, if you are a player that knows you're never going to have extra money for a game, there's a whole section of that game you cannot engage in, the store. The fact that a battle pass is presented to everyone, that we're all having roughly the same experience, though some of us are being rewarded more, I think is something that is worth a developer's time, a game designer's time to consider. How can I have these two different groups of people have very similar experiences, right? What I found interesting is that every example they try to compare monetization to such are non-PPBGs. And yeah, so, and that's fine. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the scope of the podcast. If it is about game monetization, then yes, then we're right on topic. If it was PBBG specific, then I feel like all of these other examples it's too much. Because Blizzard has to make so much more money than a website game to operate. They need to implement a different strategy.
Like it changes your rate of progression, maybe.
Yeah, it changes your rate of progression, and it also rewards you for progressing. Like, it rewards you more for progressing.
Sure,
that's cool.
Sure, yeah,
so
that's great.
That's actually a really good idea. I've thought about doing like limited time events in Trounced and possibly Elithor as well, where it's like, hey, you've got 10 levels of this thing, and if you do these specific tasks or accomplish these quests, then you unlock stuff. But
sure.
If you buy the premium version of this quest line, you get a bunch of extra stuff and some experience boost and maybe access to like a special.
So we've heard a number of different examples, and I'll let them finish. What I want to bring up is something I brought up at the very beginning of the video, which is all these different monetization models. You're still talking about reminding the player somewhere in the game that they need to pay for this upgrade, pay for this upgrade, pay for this upgrade, right? Or what experience do you want them having in your game? So with a battle pass, like with Magic the Gathering or even Hearthstone, you're reminded every now and then, hey, you need another pack of cards. You need another pack of cards. By the way, all these cards are going out of season. You need to buy all the new cards. One of the things that's very present in my mind, and that's because perhaps it's the type of game I want to make. Yes, it's a PPBG, but also it's a rich virtual world. I don't want you thinking about your real life financial situation when you are in my world. And that puts me at incredible risk for funding this project, absolutely. But I do wish the monetization topic here talked a little bit more about that. Because each one of these different strategies interrupts your player's immersion and experience to a different degree. Hearthstone, for example, I'm never wondering, because you can earn every card just by grinding. In fact, some of the best achievements in there are earned by grind. You have to win like 500 games to get the golden version of the character. That's not something you can buy. You can buy other cosmetics. But, when I go up against a player, I'm not wondering, have they outspent me? It's just you, me, we have X amount of turns to see who's going to come out on top. Boom. Right? And whatever your personal microtransaction history was with Hearthstone, it's not apparent in this
area or something, like that. I haven't actually done that, but yeah, that's a really good idea. Like it marries the idea that you can limit the amount that somebody's purchasing, right? Like it puts a cap on it. It levels the playing field in a way for everyone, but it also incentivizes people to play your game actively, as opposed to just you have the boost and you're done.
Yes.
Like you have the boost, now use it in order to get the most value out of it.
A battle pass is a wonderful way to equalize, say for example, certain drops or rewards. A lot of these games suffer by the people. Like one of the things I really don't like about the idle games, especially like IQ, the more actions you have, the longer your game will run without having to get re-clicked. So if you have more money and can extend that timer, you will get more rewards, which allow you to extend that timer and get more rewards, as opposed to new players starting out that can't afford to upgrade that timer so much. What I like about the Battle Pass idea is you could make it, hey, as long as you play X amount, you will get the majority of the rewards for the season or the month or the week. If you want to play beyond that, okay, but we stopped rewarding as much. We still reward some, but we don't reward as much. So if you're gonna know life a game, you'll still get a little bit more experience than everybody else. But as long as the bulk of the community did X amount of play, right, we can all consider this sort of fair.
Encourages more activity and people engaging with the game. That's a really great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds cool. The thing I struggle with is where to actually define, or how to define those things. Like what content, or what how do you determine the value that something is worth?
How do you
like I agonize over putting a reward tier on Patreon. It's like, oh, is another $1 too much? I can't imagine trying to design a whole system and trying to.
We're going to talk about that at the end of the podcast.
I imagine a lot of it is testing. You put feelers out there, or you run it for a while and then you adjust as necessary. But that part sounds really. That's where my difficulty would be, is figuring out how to actually define those terms, I guess.
Sure. What is value?
Yeah. I think for me, I just copy.
Sure.
Like, what are all the big AAA games doing with their battle passes or with their monetizations? Like, how are cosmetics being priced? And I think gamers play enough different games that you can kind of just ride on the coattails of what like the big dogs are doing, and people are generally fine with it. Like,
I'm gonna disagree with this a little bit. Just copying what a AAA studio is doing when you're not AAA, and expecting players to view you the same as a AAA studio and your practices and your game. There's some overlap here, but I would be careful with this. There's plenty of indie strategies. There's plenty of indie strategies and Patreon strategies, donation strategies that would absolutely work for a single dev, Kickstarters that would work for smaller studios that won't work for bigger companies. So I think it's fine to look what's going on throughout the industry, but I don't agree necessarily with this approach. I would look, if this was a conversation with the PPBG community, I would look more, what are other small other entertainment websites, single person, like maybe the closest thing related to what PPBGs are doing are almost like webcomic producers, where it's just like one artist doing their thing, funded by Patreon, right? Like, what are individuals, 1 or 2 person teams putting out content and entertainment? What are they doing to raise money, to be sustainable, etc.? I feel like that's a hell of a lot more relatable than what is Epic Games doing, and we should copy them. Because there's a whole other thing about like what I as a player am going to expect from Blizzard and what I'm going to expect from a developer in this community, right? In terms of support, bug fixes, security, backups, rollbacks, all sorts of things.
I released cosmetics in Elithor maybe like a year ago or so, and you could change things like the color of your name, or like the shadow behind your name, or special icons and stuff like that.
Yeah, I thought that was fine.
And I was thinking, people are going to pay like 50 cents to like $2 to change the color of their name. Like, not a big deal. Did some market research, and like a lot of cosmetics in games go for like $15, $20, $25.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll just put it out there as like a $20, $25 thing and see if people want to buy it.
Sure.
And people said nothing negative about it and ate it up and purchased multiple cosmetics, even though they can't use them at the same time, just to have options to swap between.
That's awesome.
Like,
so this is interesting, and I would love to talk a little bit more about this. Because while it is an $18 purchase, it can be achieved with in-game currency because the game has whales. Right? It doesn't require you to actually purchase the thing for $18. It requires you to purchase the equivalent of the premium currency or the loyalty points, which you can do in-game, and then purchase it. So it doesn't actually require someone to pay the thing. Like Idle Quest, when they do a new personnel, those boosts, those cost $65 to max. Premium boosts cost $265 to max. But people don't complain. Why? Because in the game he does reward a little in-game currency, but also there's plenty of whales in IQ, and with enough in-game gold you can buy the premium currency. So no one complains because they're like, fine, I can do this. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong. cosmetics for $18. Yeah, cosmetics are incredibly expensive and lucrative. It's why the vast majority of games out there that are doing these microtransactions, like it's not selling experience. Experience caps out. Most games have a level cap somewhere, but my gosh, there's no cap on a wardrobe, right? The thing you also got to touch on when you start going down this road is that your players will eventually pick up on the fact that you are creating cosmetic assets instead of actual gameplay. And as a single player game, so this is my feedback to the devs in this podcast when they talk about avatar creators and cosmetics. When you are the sole dev on a project, your players will eventually observe that all you're spending your time doing is creating an avatar creator versus other functionality or content in the game. That new expansions are just a lot more cosmetic, like stuff like this. This is like kind of different with like how people perceive like Blizzard, at least a little bit, because the main gameplay engineers are not the model makers, not the asset makers who just make a new mount or recolor a new mount. Putting out a new mount doesn't compromise whether or not arena PvP or a new raid was balanced. These are completely different departments. So just keep that in mind with cosmetics, is you have to have enough of a studio that people aren't questioning whether or not the game is actually continuing to be supported and developed.
It kind of blows my mind because for me, I'm not someone who's motivated by cosmetics. Like
Okay.
I'll customize,
Sure.
but I'm not going to spend $20 so I can look.
But there
slightly
are plenty
different
of
than
people that
everybody
do.
Else. You know,
Yeah.
I want to win. That's
Yeah.
my goal.
Interesting.
So it's interesting to me that people would spend $60, $80 just to customize the way that they appear to everyone else, and that's perfectly fine.
This is why the predatory stuff is so nuts, man. This is it. This is why, there are absolutely people going to spend thousands of dollars just to appear slightly different than other people. This is where this is why this topic is so nuts and why it's billion-dollar industry on this and how we play on this stuff. Yeah, winning takes many forms. So yeah, people will definitely spend money on cosmetics.
Fine way for them to spend their money.
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, market research. I guess that's comes down to that. Is just taking a look at what's going on around you, and you don't have to take a shot in the dark.
No,
That's,
but also know what market
it is
you're
interesting to think if
you're
people
in.
would pay, let's say, 50 cents to change the color of their name. Like something like that does seem almost absurd at face value.
Yeah.
But when I think about it, it does make sense because I feel like, especially in like
This is why I want players that spend money to be in one of these podcasts. It's not absurd. It's not absurd. I mean, maybe to you, and that's fine. But this is why, like, we figured out decades ago that there are different people that play games and what's motivating them, right? And if you want to make a really successful game, you have something in your game that appeals to everybody, right? Different people they're different, especially in what motivates them and what they're willing to pay for.
For us in a largely text-based medium, something like that does like catch the eye. And if you do want to stand out, even if it's just for the sake of just for the sake of standing out, that's it. Why $1? Some people, I mean, I could see myself doing that. What's $1? I mean, it's not like money's falling all over me, but if I get some kind of value out of it, it's not that much.
Yeah.
I could see that making some sense.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the crazy thing to me is like, because it is just text based, right? Like it's one of the benefits of being in a browser is you have access to like CSS and you can customize things like that relatively easy. So there's literally some name colors that I have as a cosmetic that's just color purple, and that's it. Like no special hex, no like linear gradient or anything, just color purple, and I sell it for $18, and I have like half a dozen to a dozen people who are like, I love that color. I'm gonna spend $18 to change my name to purple. Like, and so you have enough variety, especially in the browser space, to create special gradients or animations or things like that can really, you can create enough variety that players can mix and match to create their own custom combination. And even though that combination may cost $50 or $60, like players have no problem accumulating those premium currency over time and purchasing that, and they're happy with the result because they're unique, right? They're not like anybody else. So yeah, it blew my mind. Like thinking about people wanting this so bad, and I was like, maybe it's a vocal minority kind of thing, but no, like the vast majority of people really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm taking notes here for IC.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should do it.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the price because you mentioned like 50 cents to $2.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes down to it, if you put a package up for $50, that's essentially
Here we go.
like 100 people buying something for 50 cents.
Yep.
But instead, you only need to sell that to one person.
Yeah.
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 That's like a rule of thumb in the SaaS space too, like software as a service. Like the idea of creating a $5 a month SaaS is so hard to scale because you need tens of thousands of people to make it worthwhile.
Sure.
Or if you create like a very high end SaaS that's maybe, $50 to $100 a month, you have to sell like, a fraction of what you would otherwise.
Sure, but that's the risk.
All you have to do is either
right. That's the risk. I either get 1,000 people. I can get 1,000 people to give me $1 a month, or I can get one person to give me $1,000. If I go the whale strategy and I blow it, if that one player decides to leave the game, as opposed to a strategy in which I have $5 a month subscribers, if one person leave, even if 10% of my people leave, my income hasn't dropped by 100%, it's only dropped by 10%, right? There's a reason to also go for the minimum, for the just getting a little bit of a subscription from everyone and not necessarily whaling. There is some security there as well.
Package it in a way that it shows the value to the player, or just put enough stuff into the package that $50 package is like, becomes a no-brainer, whatever that looks like. But yeah, you're right, it's absolutely easier to sell. I've sold way more high ticket items than I have low ticket items as far as actual money spent.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Like my $100 plus packages have brought in significantly more revenue than my $5 to $10 packages.
But why?
Even though way more people buy the $5 to $10 packages.
More yes. Okay. So this is just now this is a good conversation. Now we're talking about Elithor and the people that are paying for Elithor. Whales will outspend the minnows. People are buying the most expensive packages because they're the most value per dollar spent. So one or two people buying those huge packages will outspend everybody else. People, that's this. When you talk through this is a no-brainer. If you let people spend unlimited amounts of money in a pay-to-win game, they will do it. This is what this industry is turning into. Yeah. And they will outspend the people. Yes, you've had more people spend the $5, more people buy the $5 packages, but you need to sell that $5 package 20 times to make up for that one whale. And then that one whale just repeats that same $100 package. Yeah. I mean, if you go the microtransaction route, Elithor has done it well, right? So has IQ. IQ rewards you for spending for making the premium currency, for doing the real money transaction. I mean, this is the whole model here. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like the model matches the the activity level, like, or the maybe enthusiasm level. You're gonna have like the whales or the people who are like hardcore into it. And if they're that invested into the experience already, I would imagine they'd be more willing to buy the higher ticket item versus trying to convince like the majority of casual players that they should spend even $1.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a decision you make.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Right. This is the conversation about the integrity of the game, the integrity of what you're willing to put your players through. I'm willing to say to everyone, screw it. It's easier for me to design a system that I'm allowing to be unfair, but I will allow, if you're going to pay me more money, I'll take your money and give you a better advantage. As opposed to saying, you know what, I'm going to try to keep the game fair and just sell it to be a great experience that the majority of you are willing to give me $3 to $5 a month. Does the game have to be that great? No. The game only has to be good enough that the whale is going to whale. And that is, I guess, my problem with a lot of these microtransaction games. They're going to cater to the whale. They only have to be good enough for the whale to be willing to whale, and the game only has to be good enough to keep the free-to-play players in the game so the whale can feel like they're competing against someone. And just like earlier in the podcast, people are like, it just has to be fun enough, right, for you to stick around. And you knowing it's a free-to-play game, you've already lowered your expectations on the quality the game has to be. Because you're like, I'm getting it for free. It can be a shitty experience. As opposed to, like New World, I'm going to pay my $40. I'm going to go in, right? But your expectations are lowered by the fact that it's free, that you're willing to stick around longer in a terrible game. And by terrible, I'm just saying like a not as balanced game or whatever, which is great because they just want you to stick around so the whale can see, hey, I've got plenty of minnows to eat up or to battle or whatever. So, yeah, there's a whole thing here that people have been figuring out for the last 15 years since social games, right?
Oh, good.
Go on. No, Karen.
I was just thinking about what you were saying about the web technologies. It reminds me of eBay listings, where they kind of like nickel and dime you on all the different little customizations you can do to get your listing to stand out. But it's clearly a model that works. And this,
Sure.
Our games aren't exactly that, but I think there is a comparison there where if you want to show off your whatever, that you have all these different ways you can split that by font color, font size, shadows, whatever, let alone graphically, like your avatar options and all that kind of stuff. Totally makes sense. Sorry, what you're saying?
No, I was just gonna quickly go back to like the cost of things as well, because when it comes to SaaS, I know it's slightly off topic, but the chances are you're gonna spend a lot more time helping those people that are spending $5 or $10 than the guys that are spending 50 or 100. So it's not just the value of the package. You're actually cutting down on your customer service because the people that are buying your product really want it and they're actually invested in it.
That's true.
Yeah, and all those things.
I find investment an interesting concept with free anything. You can invest your time or you can invest your money. Right? There is certain values in there is a certain value in having a free-to-play player in your game. They're collecting drops, they're populating the marketplace, they're participating in the marketplace, they're participating in PvP, they're participating in the leaderboards. They add life to your game. And I think when this conversation of pay to win comes in to games, we end up talking a lot more about just simply how does the money affect the game rather than the quality of the game and the experience of the game. Is someone willing? I don't necessarily believe that someone willing to throw $1,000 into a game is more invested than other players. All that's demonstrated is that someone has disposable income. I've seen players. There's a character. I'll mention Sin, SYN. Showed up one day in IQ, dumped hundreds of dollars, was gone a month later. There's people that have played, I'm not going to name the other game, but they invest hundreds of dollars. Why? Maybe they wanted to support the dev. Maybe for that bit amount of time, they wanted to immediately jump up on the leaderboard and not have to grind it out like everyone else. But they left. They left, right? Building that value, that relationship between the player and the game doesn't necessarily deepen just because someone's able to invest more cash. Maybe there's some sunk cost in there. Maybe you're willing to stick around. I don't know. I think there's a lot of psychology here that you can get into with whaling, but I don't think that this is the conversation for that. A person that has the capital to spend $1,000 a month in a game is going to move on to whatever the next game is to get that thrill.
It makes so much sense when you're thinking about it from a business perspective, but for some reason, when you take that same frame of thinking and you put it in games, it just dissolves for me. I know the same principles apply, but it just feels like a different world for some reason to me.
Because it's entertainment. It's entertainment. If music and television and shows and all this stuff, right? It's in this category, which is different. A lot of products out there, a lot of SaaS out there is there to solve a problem. Products exist, especially web products, exist to solve an inconvenience. Games fall into a different category. You're there to provide, excuse me, fun and enjoyment. There's not like a problem aside from like boredom. That's not the same as like project management software, notification services, things that like there's plenty of services out there that help with game development or mobile deployment, app deployment, buying and selling traffic. I mean, you're right. Uber and Lyft. This was to help you move around. All the DoorDash, help get food to your, these were problems. And then I'm willing to solve that problem with money. Entertainment is related but different. We don't look at film, television, music, live performances, and games the same way. We don't, even if they're both built on the same tech stacks.
It is. I mean, it's different for all kinds of reasons. But I think about people that I know that they will scoff at the idea of paying anything, like at all. I'm sure you guys have that experience too, and that's a very difficult barrier to get over that I don't think exists in many other businesses, where it's understood that if you're receiving a product or a service, well, you have to pay something for it, and we don't really have that as a baseline, at least anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this go both ways. I think part of the problem of being as accessible as these devs are in their communities means they get the feedback. I think there's plenty of people, if you want to Google Comcast and how people have reviewed their internet connection, what people feel entitled to for the service they pay for, and how their reviews are for that. Yelp, just go on Yelp. Just go anywhere where anyone's reviewed anything. Maybe they want something for free. Maybe they want to be comped. Maybe they just don't perceive the value as matching what they're paying. And I think, to be honest, in the last 10 years, especially with stuff like Facebook games making web games popular, you could pay with your time, you could pay with your social activity, or you could pay with your wallet, right? Facebook games provided a platform in which you could share out to your Facebook wall your activity in order to get other people to participate or join the game, and the game would reward you. And we got used to that, right? That I could pay with my time, I could pay with my participation, with my social postings, post to Twitter or whatever, or I could pay with my wallet. And so,
Yeah, I think it probably does have to do with a lot of the microtransaction free-to-play model, especially on mobile. Like the quality of games you can get that you can play for free, like, Diablo Immortal is a great example because I hate that game so much because of the microtransactions. And I love like old school Diablo, right? But it's something that I can't say it's not a quality game, because it really is. Like the animations are great, like the way that you can autoplay is great, all the options you have for upgrading and stuff is great. Like it's a really quality game that you can play.
The architecture in Vegas is also incredible. Those buildings look amazing, right? The light shows at the Bellagio, right? The fountain, wow. It's still a casino. Like, I'm not going to say Vegas isn't impressive. Just because Diablo Immortal has fantastic animations. Yeah, cool. And it plays smoothly. Great. That doesn't mean it's ethical or we should tolerate more of that style of game.
Play on your phone completely for free. And the only reason you can play for free is because of those microtransactions, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's enough of those games that are completely free that we're used to having high quality games to play for free. So when someone says, hey, can you pay $5 for this? I go, well, why would I do that? Yeah. Even though that might be what I actually want, because there's no microtransactions in it. Yeah. Like I'm so conditioned to quality free games, even with microtransactions, that the idea of spending money on a game feels like foreign to me.
This is what I love, the potential of the PBBG community to be, hey, let's be more community centric, funding these ultimately indie devs and indie projects rather than falling into the same monetization model that, yes, the game is free to play. Microtransactions almost trick you into thinking everyone out there is just spending $2 to $3. And that's why the game can stay alive. Diablo Immortal is taking 5-6 figures from people. That's why you can play. At a certain point, like, you participate with your time, right? It's your money and it's your time, and the games that you participate in are the ones that are going to continue to get made. It is what it is, and for developers, it is, you know, the ones that you want to, you know, that's the thing. Like, you want to look at what the big guys are doing, and you want to bring that into your own games. Okay, I would say it would be really cool if the PBBG community could double down on how to fund these things in a more ethical way. With, you know, than necessarily rely on really, you know, like IQ has this. IQ has a couple of guys that have easily spent 5 figures. So that's a game design that's allowed to happen.
Sure. Yeah, it's a supply and demand thing. Like there's so many, like, the barrier to entry, not in our space specifically, but just in general, like, it's to get a game in front of people just seems a lot more accessible and easy to do. Not that it's easy to develop, but at least it's easy to get eyes on it compared to how it used to be.
Yep.
It may still be difficult, but there's a lot more opportunity, a lot more potential, which means there's going to be a lot more games as a player. Like, you load up your iPhone or your Android or whatever, you look at the App Store, you're never going to play all the games that are there.
Yeah.
It's just the reality is different than what it used to be.
But is that the audience for these devs?
I do remember what I was going to say about you mentioned the I think it was buying access to dev servers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's such a cool one because I feel like there's something about exclusivity, not like just being part of a club.
Mm-hmm.
You know, seeing how things work behind the scenes, getting access to something that's like secret feeling, even though it's just a dev server, it's going to come out. Whatever they're working on is probably going to come out eventually in some form. If not, it gets scrapped. Who cares? But as a player, I do think it's such an exciting thing to feel like you're part of that experience.
There you go.
That you get to be like, it's almost like you had a hand in it because you did. If you're playtesting,
yeah,
it's like, you're not just a player. You're kind of like on the inside. You got the inside scoop and that kind of stuff.
You are more likely to hit this motivation in a small indie game than you are in a big game. Right? This is what actually draws people to smaller indie projects. It's why things like Kickstarter can be successful, because you feel like you have a hand in it. Like, this is the modeling that devs and monetization with PBBGs should follow more, right?
Stuff. So I definitely see the value for that. I haven't paid for anything like that myself, but I have had players for Imperial Conflict pay specifically for that purpose because it's cool. It's like you want to be ahead of the crowd.
Yeah.
So that's always a fun one to see when people are able to do that to a degree that's successful.
Yeah. I see that a lot in early access games too. I know a lot of people buy early access games because they, believe in the long-term vision, or they want to help support the devs or whatever. Boom. But I think a lot of people also do it just to get that behind-the-scenes peek, right?
Yep.
Like, I get to see this unfold. I get to see a game that's not quite finished yet. I probably have a voice in the way that it unfolds, in the way that it,
This is what I mean. Interview the players. Figure this out. If people want to be part of your project, go Google right now. Google the 1,000 fan theory. The 1,000 true fan theory. It's a monetization model that was put together 15 years ago as a proposal. 15 years ago. For an independent content creator, if you can get 1,000 true fans, and a true fan is someone that's willing to drive 200 miles to hear you play music, who's going to, like, everything you put out, they will buy. You could sustain yourself with 1,000 true fans. You don't need to hit AAA markets in order to make a living putting out what you need. You just need 1,000 true fans. Indie games are able to monetize themselves successfully in a completely different way than AAA games can. Right? And that's where I wish, like, the podcast or whatever, like, if you want to talk about the PPBG angle and the more indie feel of this versus what the big guys are doing, like, is that your goal? Those monetization goals? Or is your goal, hey, I'm trying to fund this part-time. Hey, I'm just trying to keep the servers alive. You know what I'd love to see is just a bar in your game for the server cost. Be transparent. How much it costs to run the game run the game, and then how close we are to donating to that goal. I think Eve Radio was a fan-based thing that just said they were trying to raise X amount a month, and then if they exceeded that, it showed, hey, now we're raising X amount for the next month, right? So there are monetization models here that are better fit for the type of things that I feel like these devs are putting out.
turns into the final product because I'm one of these early access people. Like being a part of that group, I think is a valuable feeling that people can purchase. And I think it's also a benefit to the developers, right? Because you have people who are helping test your product, but you also have people who are paying to test your product. Like you're proving that your like game is worth
paying for your development
because people are paying just to test it, right? Like it's a win-win on all sides.
Yes, it is.
For devs and for game
brand
players.
loyalty, studio
I think
loyalty.
There's a nice overlap there with community too.
Yes,
because I feel like when people do that, they're paying their money, but they get access to a server. Then they're paying their time. They're investing themselves personally, and then they associate with other people who are doing the same. And it feels good to feel like you're part of an experience that's going to turn into something positive that other people get to enjoy. And that's kind of hard to put a dollar value on, but you know it when you feel it. Like when you've had that kind of experience, like this is great. I'm happy. This provides some kind of like, not an emotional response or emotional investment.
It is an emotional
response.
It's like
making friends. It's like being part of something.
Yes, you're forming a community. That's completely emotional.
That's a nice monetization experience because it doesn't dip into predatory. It's not controversial necessarily.
Why is it not predatory? It can be. Why is it not? What you guys have just described is essentially like a one-time fee or maybe like a base amount that everyone that wants to participate, it's a subscription model. Everyone that wants to participate in this dev server pays the same amount. Access is a base amount. To just find out what's happening, everyone that's willing to pay that base amount is in it. Whether or not you can afford just the $5 or whether you can afford a $20, $100, or $500 monthly donation, right? We didn't make it multiple tiers. You didn't make it microtransaction where every little thing is sold. You said, hey, you want to be part of this? This is the club fee. And you notice how when they're describing this, just like access to the dev server, and then immediately go into how it feels to form a community and the emotional response, how this feels like a healthier version, just a healthier monetization. It feels like everyone that's part of this community is on equal footing. In your game, if it is a subscription model and everyone has paid to be on essentially the same the same investment level, it feels better from the player's point of view. So whether it's games or not, like when you go to the theater, when you go to a baseball game or a football game, there are different seats at different locations at different price tags. Right? The farther away you are from the stage, the more inconvenient your seat, the cheaper it is, right? We're not on all the same equal footing when we go to a live performance like that, right? It's just interesting. Like whether it's microtransactions or tiers or whatever, like there's a lot of things in our life in which real money will impact our experience. And I think one of the most complicated things in this is whether it's the quality of food, the quality of transportation, the type of other things, the quality of the television you have, your real life money and what you can afford impacting those experiences is something we are reminded of day after day after day after day. Games traditionally have provided an opportunity of escapism. Well, I play rec soccer with a whole bunch of other adults whose knees are also, everyone's knees are bothering us because we're older adults. But when everyone steps onto the soccer field, it doesn't matter how much money you have, what car you drive, anything like that. We're all soccer players for the next 90 minutes. It equalizes and we have to play to the best of our ability. Games have been that escapism. What microtransactions and real money transactions do to that space is it challenges our understanding that this was a safe place from the harsh realities that we deal with every single day, and especially with people that have financial troubles, debt, whatever, that those things are now going to follow you in and you can no longer compete on a fair field. Right? This is the argument against the microtransactions. Yes, the game has to run online or has to pay the devs. I'm going to say to the devs, figure out a way to hit your I guess it's the thing. Like you have to figure out a way to hit your goals. Absolutely. To pay for your server infrastructure, to pay for your development. but then also understand that you are in the privileged position of developing a game that could provide people that escapism and that fun that they're looking for. That's your responsibility. And when you compromise that by allowing someone else to pay for more benefits, then the integrity of that competition is gone. And yes, some people get to pay for free, but that is the story that you are the author of.
It's got a positive association, which I really like.
Yeah. And it's something that's like always worthwhile, right? It's not something you sell once and you're done. Like if you're actively developing your game, you should have new content coming out regularly.
Yep.
And so people who want to be a part of that test server would probably be willing to pay a monthly fee instead of just a flat fee to be a part of it. So that's also sustainable in the long run too. Yep.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
I want to throw some shade on that, actually.
Let's hear it.
This is a fun argument.
With Idlescape, we actually had a test server. And unfortunately, people actually took advantage of this because they knew what was coming. They knew what would hold value. They knew if things were going to get nerfed or buffed. So actually, it was quite a negative for a long time. So while, it may seem like a good idea, if you have a game that involves player-to-player trading and things, you might want to consider how you go about showing the test server, especially when it comes to actually using live data. It could really bite you in the ass.
That's a good point. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
I guess knowledge can be dangerous in certain contexts. It could.
The live test realms for New World, the PTRs for World of Warcraft allows people to play the raids before they're live so they can min-max and figure out the strategies before it's live. Knowledge is dangerous. The interesting thing here is a lot of these virtual worlds, MMOs, stuff like that, PBBGs, they try to have some sort of economy, right? And when you have updates that affect economies, right? This is not something that happens in reality where we know next month things are going to radically change in a way that is not at all predictable, right? New content just happens. But that is a challenge for games. When you have things that can shift the markets, you have to do this responsibly, and this is where having multiple devs can help. So you're not doing it all yourself because markets are complicated. And also, you have to decide what you're inviting your beta players in to see.
Could affect the balance. That's interesting.
Huh. Yeah, because I know Milvor Idle does a good job at the test server, but like it's a single player game, right? Like who cares if you know ahead of time? Like you're not competing. Yeah, so I have a balance team for Elithor. Like it's a group of players who love the game and want to help balance new features. And one of the requirements that I have, like that they need to sign off on, is that if I see them abusing that market knowledge, right? Because there's like a player-to-player market. Like, hey, this item is going to be super valuable next patch, and then they buy up a ton of it so that they can sell it ahead of time. Like that's just a permanent ban, ejection. No, second strike. That's just it. And that like it's very clear. It's one of the few rules that I have for the balance team. But I've had players who are like, because I know some people just love playing the market in games, right? Like they like seeing, this new patch is coming out. What would it look like? What would the future hold? And so I've had players who do that. Like they see a patch is coming out, and so they preemptively buy up a ton of stuff on the market. And then when the patch comes out, it's like, oh, hey, this item 10x'd and this item is like the same. So then they go and sell it. And creating like a ton of pain for me, actually, because people are blaming this balance team that I've created that they're using insider knowledge and stuff. And I have to go in and verify it every single time. So I can definitely see if you were to open the test server to like a bunch of people, that would be a nightmare to try and keep track of like who's abusing knowledge and who's not. And
I mean, this is the difficult part of game development, is you are artificially creating a world, artificially creating the economy, artificially creating the supply and demand. And so that's a way bigger thing than what we can talk about now. There are ways to, obviously the simplest thing is try to keep that to the smallest group of people that you can trust, that can also do a good job QAing whatever you need tested. But yeah.
Like, is that okay? Or, if that comes with the territory, for sure.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Yeah.
It's not just those individual players either. It's if they tell somebody, Like, how are you going to trace that back
Yep.
to the actual person that is
That's true,
abusing
yeah.
that power?
The trouble is with more popular games like World of Warcraft, someone will take that knowledge, and the way content creators can make money is by putting out YouTube videos that get traffic, so that you can show ads on that traffic, or maybe you get sponsorships or whatever. So the first content creator that can create the guide for how to min-max this particular thing is going to get the traffic, going to get the SEO. So there's whole ramifications about like why people, what's the term for it? Where it's not a leak as much as they go to the PTR or something like that, and they start sniffing the data. Right, they start unpacking the stuff. They start looking for the spoilers that are in the package that was just downloaded to try to see what's coming. Some of the stuff won't apply to the smaller games, but yeah, there is a ton of ramifications here on knowledge getting out.
Sure, yeah. Maybe I'm a little too I don't know, optimistic is the right word, but I guess it's not all roses. I mean, I know that we've had our own experiences with IC where, for our test server, it's an hourly running game on the live server, but the test server runs ticks every minute.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to find exploits that way.
Sure. Yeah.
And people have obviously found those and abused those.
Yeah.
And I guess the reality is it's not quite just like it's exciting, everyone pats themselves on the back and seems kumbaya. It's got to be, monitored and evaluated like everything else. But that said, in general, I do think it's a nice offering, at least, to feel like you can be, part of an experience that not everybody will get to be a part.
You nurture that 1,000 fan theory. You start bringing in more of the beta, and I'm not talking about building like an unhealthy relationship between players and the developer, right? Because that can get weird and toxic, but if you get people invested into the quality of the game, they're less likely to abuse it. Yes, there will always be some people that do that, but you will more than likely get people that actually want to see your vision come to life, that'll do a good job testing something to make sure everything goes right, not testing looking for the exploit.
Part of. But like you guys are pointing out, it's got trade-offs.
Yep.
I completely agree. I think it is a good idea, but yeah, you've also got to bear in mind that if you are going to use what is going to be the live data to balance, you need to be aware that people will exploit this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I guess this is could be a good topic of itself, but people are always going to be looking for the exploit.
Try to obfuscate the live data.
When
really try to figure out what it is that you need to test, what you already have data on that you could extrapolate balance from without putting it in front of a live person. If you've written a new like market or shop interface, a new upgrade interface, does it need the live data if all you're doing is testing? When I click a button, it subtracts this currency and gives me X reward. Does that need to be the real amounts? Are we testing that particular thing, or are we testing other functionality? If you're trying to get a feel on, hey, does this feel too expensive or too cheap? Maybe that's something you do with a smaller group that you really trust. If you're going to put real content in front of someone, and that does create a bigger overhead. Hey, I'm going to run a whole beta group with fake data, right? But in the end, the quality of your game will be better because you would have run it through some tests. The amount of times I see someone do a live patch to production and it goes wrong, it's very frequent, and I'm always like, why didn't you test this? Why was there such urgency to get to to get this change out live?
Money is involved for something like early access. I could even see that being twisted to like, the people who pay are able to get access to figure out how to exploit the game or something weird like that.
Sure.
Which unfortunately, that's clearly not going to be the intent, but people could misperceive it just because sometimes that's what happens. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I see that in like early access games too. Like there's always people who are like, going to try and be helpful and report bugs that they see them and really help move the development along. There's also always going to be people who will look for those bugs and keep them secret and try and hide them.
This is a whole other wonderful topic to have on another podcast. Just testing
so I see that not just in our space, but in games in general, especially.
I mean, we're not talking about monetization
like we're dealing
so much.
with real humans,
Yeah.
Almost. Have you guys seen any games that do like I guess this would be DLC. I'm thinking of like where
Yeah.
there's a base universe or a
Yep.
base like narrative, and there's
Yep.
an offshoot that you have to pay to unlock to kind of
Yeah.
round out your experience of the game
Yeah.
universe.
This is
Have you seen
Slyboots
that done
Studio.
anywhere well in Outer Space or otherwise?
Pay for the expansions.
I don't think so. Are you thinking kind of like the RuneScape model? Like you have the free to play world that you can mess around in, but if you want to experience like the whole world, you have to pay to like go and get access to all the skills and stuff.
Something like that, but maybe inverted, where for free you get the whole thing, but
Yeah.
if there's like some lore or some
Sure.
side like thing that kind
Oh.
of like fleshes out the experience from fleshes out the narrative a little bit.
Yeah. This is Slyboots Studio. This is what I'm imagining for Pyroclasm or Dura or something like that, where the initial game is all free and it's a full game. But to help fund the game, if people like it, fund the expansion. Whether we raise money and the expansion is released when we hit a certain goal, or we develop the expansion and then sell it. But yeah, that's how I would do a transaction. I would call that an in-game. What does the Apple Store call it? An in-app purchase. So I would do that. I wouldn't necessarily call that a microtransaction because it's not like an individual consumable or something like that. I'm going to fix my camera here for a sec. Sorry, and we'll listen a little bit more. All right.
That's only for people who like buy the subscription or pay for whatever. I feel like that could be an interesting experience.
Sure.
Interesting benefit for those who are willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
So how would you design that in a way that, like, let's say there's like a certain storyline you're selling access to,
Yep.
that like I'm in a guild and I decide, hey, like Randy should go and buy that, and then he'll tell us all what the story was, and you know what I mean, like, so we're not each purchasing it to get the experience. We can just kind of
Yeah, I don't think this is a good argument against it. This is like saying, should we go to the movie or should we watch Stranger Things, or should we just read the Wikipedia? You know, what was pitched was, here's an expansion for content. The people that want to experience that, there is no substitute for experiencing it. We're not going to all pool together and say, you buy it and I will get an equal experience by you just telling me what the story is. If I'm interested, right? Depending on my motivation, if I want to experience that, this would be, if it's lore based, we're talking explorers here. If I want to learn more about the world, I want that. That's my motivation. I'm gonna buy it, and there is no substitute for that. It's like seeing a TV show, seeing Game of Thrones, versus someone just telling you about it. Those are not the equivalent experiences. So
hear about it.
So if you wanted to do that, I don't think you'd run into trouble with hearing stuff secondhand
from someone else, or I'm sure there's like, you know, custom items you could get or cosmetics you could unlock or things like that. But
sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how it would actually play out. I guess that's where the tricky part would be. But it does sound exciting from like I guess as a writing experience, or I guess reading experience for the player to know that, like, you know, there's this event in the game universe that's happening, and it involves these characters or these entities or whatever, and then there's this side like backstory about this one side character or something that just could be its own story of itself that you wouldn't know unless you paid the $10.
You're selling the content to explorers.
That's really
what you're doing.
I like that idea.
Yeah,
I think that it
maybe completionists for achievers, right? If there's extra things
it lends itself, you have to design the game around that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
It's not something that, like, I'm thinking about like Elithor. I don't think I could add something like that just randomly to the game, because like it would kind of break the whole structure of the game, or it would be so tangential that it.
Going back to the beginning of the podcast, that's why like a lot of this stuff has to do with like, what is your business plan for this game, right? What is the strategy you're going to use to hit your goal, right? Yeah, Elithor, excuse me, has never presented expansion content in a way that I need to make a one-time purchase to access this. But there's plenty of other games that do this. I don't know that they're in PPBGs, but yeah,
it wouldn't make any difference at all, right? Like you almost have to kind of design your game either narratively or something, like keeping in mind you're going to have offshoots, you know.
Sure, you have to have story hooks in place, or at least the potential for them. I asked because I feel like the writing side of games is always so interesting to me, and when we think about monetization, for me, I always think like, oh, there's an opportunity right there. Like, how do
Yes.
you assign value to, how do you break a story apart in a way that you could assign value to different parts that aren't necessary, but could add a whole lot to the individual who's playing it for the long haul.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody do anything like that in particular, but I do wonder if that's, if that's done anywhere.
It'd be interesting to think about what do narrative, because most PBGs don't seem to have narrative, right? We're designing games that have a little tick. And what do you do with the narrative there? Now, like Pyroclasm has a lot of story. Dura has a bit. That I think is... And I think that's why I get so hooked on this particular topic. With my games, I really am looking at that experience of an immersive world. The storytelling is so important, much more than like a leaderboard of who's got the most amount of stone mined since the creation of the server, right? So, yeah, I do think there's a lot of opportunity here. You have to keep in mind that additional storylines and quests only appeal really to explorers. Right? If there's a weapon in there that'll help me against PvP or something like that, now I'm appealing it to killers. If there's achievements and stuff that can be things that can be unlocked, stuff that I could brag about or put on my profile that about like completionists, now I'm tying into achievers. If I can do the content with other people, right? Now we're tying into socializers. So it depends on how you want to do this, but I do think what you're describing is maybe an expansion or a micro expansion, some sort of content, right? That can be delivered. Yeah, I think this is a fine strategy.
In a way that feels interesting.
The only game that I know of, and it's not a browser-based game whatsoever, but it's Dying Light. They have some quite intensive DLCs, and for the first game, you could play through the entire story. But then, if you bought the DLC, it would unlock this like completely different story in a completely different city.
Cool.
So that's locked behind a paywall because it is DLC. But it isn't in our genre at all.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's not in our genre we've talked about on this podcast. But
I guess the tricky thing about, I don't know, I can only speak from experience with Imperial Conflict, and I don't know how that kind of thing could translate to a game that's really not story-based, like ours just isn't. So I don't know how we would hook anything.
Right. Yeah, that's tough.
Like that, but I know other games are a little more focused on, I guess, how would I say this? Just world building, a little more care put into world building.
Yeah.
I feel like that could be a good opportunity there.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And I think it lends itself well to the medium too, like having it in a browser, like being able to create more story or quests to interact with or something like that. Like creating content for browser-based games is significantly easier than creating content for like, a Unity game or something like that. Like you're not messing as much with assets and things. If you have the right engine in place, just adding straight content should be relatively straightforward.
Sure.
So yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
you guys have like
you can make it
like
work with Unity,
like a
but
favorite monetization model that you
favorite
see?
monetization
I'm thinking
model.
about games that I play like just in general, and I can't think of. For the most part, I don't really care. I don't spend a lot of money on games. So as a player, I'm trying to think when I do. I don't know. Maybe I guess the subscription model. Maybe I don't know. What do you guys think?
I like the idea of a sub model, but I don't like to actually spend it. So like RuneScape is coming out with their, what are they calling it? Like early access or like fast start worlds or something like that, where it's like accelerated experience rate, and it's basically its own world, completely separate from the rest of RuneScape, that you can create a character and race high scores with people like from brand new. Yeah. And then after you've leveled to a certain point, then your character joins the main world. Yeah. And so you can keep playing on like normal with everybody else, but it's kind of like this fresh start type feel, but it's only for people who are subbed. And so I love RuneScape. And I used to play it a whole bunch and would play it, but you can purchase, bonds in games. You don't have to actually spend real money. Like you can use your in-game currency to buy it and stuff. And so the idea of me spending $11 a month to like play this game is like, I don't really actually want to spend it. Like, what if I buy it and play it for a day and then like I decide I don't want to play it anymore? Like I feel a pressure to play the game when I have a sub running. So I've done the same thing too with like World of Warcraft. Like I play with, my brothers are super into games, and so whatever they pick up, like I'll pick up and play with them. And so there was a season where we were all playing World of Warcraft, And then as it started to kind of taper off at the end, I just like preemptively cut my sub because I was like, I don't want to be spending, however much money a month and then not feel like I'm getting my money's worth.
So this is interesting because his perception of the money that he's given to the studio is different, or it could be different depending on the studio. It's like when you have a subscription to Netflix and you're not 24/7 watching Netflix. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm paying for something that I'm not using right this minute. Yeah, part of it's just your user expectation, right? I'm paying for access to something. How much do I need to use this thing to make the sub feel worth it? This is where I challenge this a little bit. You having a subscription to WoW and a player in your PBBG having a subscription should honestly feel like two different things. I should be willing to, like, if I was to pay for a subscription to a small game, regardless of how much I play it, I should feel like I'm helping fund the developer or the game or something like that. There's a different a different opportunity here for emotional attachment to this monetary transaction, right? So while subscriptions in general can suffer from, oh, I'm paying for something that I'm not using, like, yes, but there's also an opportunity here to create value that the subscription isn't necessary. I mean, this is what I love about Patreon and why I word it for Slyboots Studio. You're not paying for the game. You're not even funding one particular game. You're funding the studio and everything the studio puts out. The games are, generally we're going to do them for free and sometimes open source, but you're, you're funding what the studio puts out. Yeah. So anyway, this is interesting, but it'd be also interesting to hear someone how they feel about spending money for a big AAA game versus a small indie game, and is there a difference in how how whales feel about it, but then also people that can only afford to spend like $10. How do you feel putting that to Blizzard? How do you feel putting that to Elithor or Queslar?
Out of it,
Yeah.
So I think I probably would lean toward microtransactions, because it makes games more accessible. I can try them for free. I can get a feel for it.
You can do that with many models.
More predatory, which is the downside. But I think that microtransactions are kind of the future of monetization. And as we figure out ways to do it more ethically in ways that don't step on people's toes, like, it will be better for the gaming industry overall.
Sure.
So I think that's probably where I personally would lean.
It's interesting we're not talking about what predatory means in this conversation. I don't think at all once in this whole podcast has anyone mentioned the word gambling. So yes, microtransactions can be done well. They can. I disagree with the accessibility thing. You could do. I mean, WoW has a free tier. Many games have free tiers or introductory time periods where you could play for free or play a limited amount before you have to pay for a sub. You also have subscription models that send like a 1-day subscription, a 7-day subscription, right? So I don't necessarily think it has to be a microtransaction. At least for me, that just feels like now I have to put a store in my game. And I would prefer not to do that. Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I would go with the Battle Pass.
Yeah,
I have spent.
I like this. I like the Battle Pass.
I care to admit, probably $10,000-$15,000 in total over the past 10 years or so, maybe.
Okay, so an average of $1,000 a year.
On different things. I mean, CS:GO, for example, I have bought an absolute metric ton of skins. And they range from like a few bucks to a few thousand. Wow. And yes, I've spent the most I spent on a skin was $1,300 on a single skin.
Let me just rewind there. There was a second. Hold on.
A few bucks to a few thousand. Wow. And yes, I've spent the most I spent on a skin was $1,300.
Sorry, there's a part here.
Be better for the gaming industry overall.
Okay.
So I think that's probably where I personally would.
No. See, that's not a big amount of money.
I would go with the Battle Pass. I have spent way more than I care to admit, probably.
This right here is the crux of my entire argument. I'm not making fun of Ian or anything like that. The players spending money on the game are embarrassed to admit how much they're spending on the game. That is an experience you've created for your player. That is not an experience I want to create for a player of my game. Anyways, I don't want someone ashamed or embarrassed. Not that whatever. Admit how much they spent on a game, right? Hey, I make games that I'm getting an average of $5 average revenue per user, whatever. Diablo Immortal, those developers, they had mentioned about going to, these developers mentioned about being able to go to bed at night and feeling like they did it ethically. Right? On this spectrum, you can create a game that you could take $10,000 from someone. Like Idle Quest RPG, I think people have spent $10,000, $15,000, right? And then they give you a special title based on how much you've spent, as if it's part of some sort of leaderboard or achievement, something to brag about, right? So I will just say it's interesting when this conversation of money, and now when it comes to people are hesitant to admit how much they're actually spending, just like you see with people who gamble and try to hide it. But I will say too, an average of $1,000 a year is nowhere near what we're talking about for whales, right? This is $1,000 a year. Whales are like $1,000 a month minimum.
$10,000-$15,000 in total over the past 10 years or so, maybe.
Yep.
On different things. I mean, CS:GO, for example, I have bought an absolute metric ton of skins. And they range from like a few bucks to a few thousand.
Yep.
Wow. And yes, I've spent the most I spent on a skin was $1,300 on a single skin. Which is actually interesting because if I kept it and sold it now, that would actually be worth $3,500-$4,000.
Wow.
So it would actually have been an incredible investment. But I actually sold it at a loss for $1,000.
Yeah.
But I like battle passes. Any game with a battle pass, I will probably just pay for it.
Sure.
I enjoy the progression. I enjoy getting those little rewards.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even I've picked up Wild Rift recently. Which is basically League of Legends on mobile for those that don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a battle pass going. And I pick it up because it's just I like the missions. I like the animations of when you complete something. I like that little dopamine hit,
Yep.
Some people enjoy social media, getting likes on Twitter or whatever. But I just like leveling. I think it's fun.
Socializer versus achiever, right?
Yeah.
We know what Ian is, right? Let's make a game that,
I'm trying to think for myself. I guess
these are different things.
Earlier, and I went on that whole spiel about cosmetics and skins and stuff. I don't really buy any. Like, it sounds fun, but when it comes down to pull it out my wallet, I'm like, I don't know.
Because you're not motivated in that socializer category,
it's tough,
right?
Maybe it's a generational thing too with us who grew up with mainly offline gaming. That it's hard for me to think like I want to pay for anything other than paying for the full game.
Right.
Like it's not that I'm cheap. I'd totally put down for a game if I could see the value and it makes sense and it sounds exciting. I don't mind paying. Like a lot of the games on Steam, they're really inexpensive. Even I'm like, oh, this is only $10. Okay, yeah. But that's I think because maybe a different generation where that kind of stuff would seem cheaper. Now maybe it's just I don't know. But I guess if I had to pick one, I would think maybe skins and stuff, just because I like the idea of people kind of fleshing out their identity and their avatar and stuff.
Yeah. Have you ever not purchased a game because it's like $20-$30?
Just to touch on the avatar thing. It'd be interesting, like, to put out an avatar maker and just say, hey, make your avatar, and it's free, right? Versus, like, essentially like, almost endless purchases there, right? That's a bit of the trap there. At what point do you stop making content for that, for people to express themselves?
And you're not sure if you would really enjoy it or not, and so you kind of waffle on the fence, watch YouTube videos, maybe don't pull the trigger.
Yeah, there's been a couple of cases, and a lot of times, maybe it's the games I like to play. It's often there's like a demo version. It's like, okay, cool, there you go. However much, like 10 minutes long, and I get to experience a taste of it. Okay, now I'll pay the $20. This seems like it was worth it.
Yeah.
It seems to be my experience, I guess.
I don't remember the last time I actually bought a game. Every game I've played has been free to play with microtransactions or a subscription. Elder Scrolls Online, I really enjoyed. Still do when I get a chance to play it. But I have a subscription that just rolls every month. and I haven't played it for 2 months now, but I still pay it because I just enjoy the game and I know I'll get back into it. And with that subscription, you get like crowns, which are essentially like gems or credits.
I like
So
the idea of
they
a
stack up
subscription
over the
that rolls. Yeah.
But I don't ever remember buying like a game.
See, it was interesting back in the day because more often when a game had to ship, it had to be of a certain quality, right? It had to go through testing because once it was put on that CD, right, or the cartridge, like there was no opportunity, very little opportunity to get a patch to fix stuff. Nowadays, we tolerate developers putting out essentially broken or imbalanced software with the expectation that it's going to get patched later. Sometimes maybe this is good. I don't know. Sometimes back in the day, it's sort of nice to know this is a complete project ready to go, right? Ready to a complete product. And the truth is, sometimes those games were absolutely terrible, right? There's plenty of cases of that too. So again, that could be a whole other. We've gone way beyond PBBG, and we're just talking about just free trial or just paying for games in general in the entire games industry. So there's a lot to unpack there as to player psychology and why they're making a purchase. Yeah.
I don't buy any of the AAA games. They don't interest me anymore.
It's interesting you say that because I just realized I do buy games here and there, but it's not quite what we're talking about. But a lot of the games that I play are on Xbox Game Pass, so I do pay for a subscription.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not a game subscription; it's a platform subscription.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now I get to try all these things for free because it's just I'm paying for it, but it's a very small amount compared to the amount of different games I'm trying. I guess that would be, I don't know if that would be considered a game model so much as like a bigger picture kind of model, but that's, I guess, kind of related.
I'm building something in that realm, actually.
Revenue, right?
The new job I have, I can't really reveal many details, but one of the ideas I actually want is to implement a platform pass. So you basically pay $10, $15 a month, and you actually get benefits in all the games that we actually publish and develop.
Cool. So it's the same concept, just like blasting it open and multiplying it. That's super cool.
Yeah. The reason for it is because I used to play Perfect World, and they turned into Arc Games. And basically what you do there is you go to arcgames.com, you fill up your Zen, and then you can spend it on any of the games in that platform. So you're not ever forced to just spend it in one place. Yeah. And with the variety of games that we have,
encourages people to
it makes a lot of
buy
sense,
that currency.
Because if players buy something in one game and then they don't like it, that currency isn't then strongly put into that game. They can put it in a different game if they want to.
I mean, okay, so I will say this,
you mentioned that because
this makes sense, but you've also extrapolated. You've also brought the more you can separate people from their actual money, the easier of a time they will have spending it, right? So if I had to make the decision for each individual game that I was going to see an actual $sign USD, what was I going to have to spend in this individual game, I would hesitate every single time. But if you can get me to put in my credit card over here and buy 1,000 gems, and I just take gems over here, well, I mean, this is just the microtransaction model. Now, instead of buying this one perk, I'm simply spending gems in this game or this game. That's easier for me to do. And then I'm only doing one real life money transaction for the gems, right? And when I'm out of gems, then I just come back and I do one more transaction, right? As opposed to in each individual game. Yeah, there's totally a reason why this strategy works. You want to minimize the amount of time you actually show someone the USD or the euro sign or something like that, and remind them that yes, we'd like your actual money. So, yeah, I think this is fine.
Nexon games, like they publish MapleStory and stuff like that. They used to do that. So you could buy NX Cash was their premium currency and use it across any game. Yep. And they actually stopped doing it because people could use it in different games. And so people would say like, oh, well, like I'll buy a little bit in this game and then maybe I'll use it in a different game. And it actually ended up lowering their revenue like pretty drastically. And so it could be argued that it's predatory. But they siloed every individual game. So like if you spend $50 on MapleStory and you only use 10 of it, you can't use the...
It sounds like the only one it was unfair for was the publisher. I don't know what's predatory about that. How did How did it affect the user in a negative way that they could decide where to put their premium currency?
The rest of that 40 on like Cartrider or some other game. Like you'd have to go spend more money on Cartrider to do the separate one and let your money just sit in the other game. So
I think
I don't know.
Oh, I see what you mean. Let it go into that pool and sit there.
I don't know if they're a billion-dollar company, but they're certainly in the hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
Especially with the success of Maple Story. So perhaps for them, yeah, it definitely makes sense. But for our genre, which is quite a bit smaller than them, I see it more as if you're getting revenue, it's not a negative if they're just going to spend it in another game that you publish.
Yeah,
like you're still getting that revenue.
Correct.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I think there may be like some issue with maybe stepping on toes with monetization and stuff. Like, because if you have, let's say, $5 gets you 5,000 gems.
Yep.
You have to use that same exact valuation across all your games.
No, you don't.
And so there's no, fluctuation. Like you have to, keeping in mind, you're balancing economies of different games and balancing what the premium currency is worth and what kind of benefits it could give you. Like I could see how that could introduce a lot of complexity as far as planning ahead, especially with multiple.
Okay, after I've said no now 4 times to Caleb, I'll explain. Kongregate have this same thing. So does Facebook. You buy a shared premium currency of the platform. Then you as the user can decide where to put that currency. Kongregate had creds, and there were many different games that take creds. You as the platform developer or even the game developer don't need to care if 2 different games are charging 2 different values of creds for an equivalent experience boost potion. That's a determination the player has to make by how they feel about that particular game and how they feel about the other particular game. It's not a challenge put on the developer to care about what's happening in the other game or the platform. Like Kongregate had no say or care about how your game was designed. That was on you. You just took creds as a payment option. So I will say, yeah, you could try to make it really complex and try to balance a dozen different games, but that has never been the reality as far as I've seen it. A publisher simply provides the premium currency, the game developers determine what is purchased in the game, and the players determine if that value is worth that amount. The way you could easily simplify this, every single one of the games they've talked about today takes US dollars as currency, and yet we as players get to decide what is the actual value I consider. Is it worth investing in WoW or RuneScape or Melver Online or Elithor? Each of these games has taken a common currency, the US dollar, and at no point was it complex that those developers each had to figure out what was happening in the economy of another game. So this argument, I don't feel like, unless I'm misunderstanding it, I don't agree with this point he's making.
Multiple titles.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that, especially from the balancing aspect.
It doesn't happen.
Once
that's
you
why.
put the premium currency into the game,
Yep.
then it's in the game.
It's
You
in the
can't
game.
then pull it out.
Yeah.
It's more of a central buying platform.
Yeah.
Where you top up your account on the publishing platform.
Kongregate
and then you can
is the
choose
publisher.
to put it into a game, but once it's in the game, you can't then pull it
Facebook.
out into another.
Gotcha.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Okay.
As far as like whether or not something like that could be predatory, I guess that always goes back to the what expectations are set, like from a user experience. Like what did it? Are they feel like they're being tricked? I guess that's
Right.
how.
It's not only expectation on the user side, but intention of the developer. Is the intention of the developer or the publisher to be predatory is what I would say would define it to be predatory. Because there's plenty of users out there who do all the gambling games who don't feel like the thing is predatory. And so by their expectations, everything's fine. I would say the intention of the publisher or the developer should also weigh heavily on whether or not we consider something predatory.
I feel like predatory stuff always comes back to it's like, that's not what I thought I was getting. Like, oh man, this is you feel like whatever. But if it's done in a way where people
you can have buyer's remorse, but I would also put a lot more responsibility on devs.
See that being too much of a problem.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I think if you're like, hey, you can use currency anywhere, and then 6 months later you're like, crap, our revenue's down, so you just kind of backpedal and like, actually you can't. Like, that'd be pretty clever.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the last game I purchased, because we were, you mentioned that. I'm trying to think, like, I just never buy games unless like I have friends who have bought games. So I think the last game I bought was like Civ 6, whenever that came out.
Yeah.
Like
Some
forever
socializing,
ago.
right?
And then more recently, Raft. I don't know if you guys have heard
He's
of that.
motivated to buy it
It's
if
like
he's got friends to play it with.
kind of a survival game. You're on a raft, you collect stuff, build up your raft. So, and that's like, $20. But even I was thinking about that game as an example of monetization. Like, it's made by a super small dev team, maybe even one guy, and it's $20, and it's got pretty big and popular, and so he sold a whole bunch of it on Steam. But I was thinking, like, I've gotten way more than $20 of enjoyment out of this game. Like, if it was a free-to-play game and I could just jump in, I at this point probably would have spent $20 or more on certain cosmetics or making my character look a certain way, or like a goofy hat,
if that's
or
what the
something
dev
like
wants
that,
his experience to
and
be.
so there's part of me that actually wants to support this developer even more, because like I love the game so much. I love what they've done. They've got like a real knack for game making, but I have zero avenues of supporting them. Like, I can't buy anything. I could buy more titles of the game and give them to people, but everyone that I know already owns it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
I
interesting.
got to give it to me.
Yeah, there you go. So, but yeah, like as a player, I often think of monetization from a developer perspective. But as a player, I think the buy to play model, because there are games where I have not bought them because I've waffled on the fence and I'm not sure. Like Foxhole is an example. I want to buy the game. It sounds really cool. It's like $30. Do I want to drop $30 on the game that I might like get into and it feels kind of clunky, or I don't enjoy it, and then I can do a refund on Steam, but I don't really want to have to do that, right? So I've just opted to not get it yet. I might still buy it at some point, but it's a very big wall for me to actually commit to spending money. But then in the case of Raft, like I spent the money and now I want to spend more, but there's no opportunity for that, which is...
So is this a problem with the game's monetization? Do we have to put in a microtransaction shop just so you can give more money to the dev? Does the dev have a Patreon? Do they have a Coffee? Do they have a PayPal? Why has the developer not set up another way to receive funds? Do they do a Kickstarter, right? Literally, earlier in this conversation, we talked about donations, and these guys were all saying how donations are difficult to do. Here you have someone saying, I wish I could give the guy more money. Have a way to donate, right? Isn't that what they're saying? Why compromise the integrity of the game or change the game just because you want to give more money, right? I don't know how often this situation comes up. But that's why I'm like, indie game developers have multiple ways to get money. GitHub does funds now. If you want to open source a product or whatever, you can fundraise through GitHub. You can fundraise through PayPal, Patreon, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. Like, what he is saying is something that's completely relevant to game developers, but I don't know why. For them to change, the nice thing about, like with Raft, they make the game and then they're done with it. To put in a microtransaction store, especially with cosmetics, is that many more assets someone has to create, which means you have to pay someone to create those assets and then hope someone's going to buy enough cosmetics, excuse me, to balance that out. So I think this is an interesting conversation, but at the same time, like they were literally talking about donations earlier, where there are games that are needing money and how it is difficult to get money from somebody. So in this particular case, a player has considered a game worth it and can't find an avenue to give money. That I would put squarely on the developer needing to put up a couple other things. Have a Patreon for special releases or special information or whatever.
Kind of a bummer, So,
yeah, that's an interesting problem. I mean,
yeah,
it's like, what's that that Fry from Futurama? Shut up and take my money kind of thing.
Yeah.
I totally get it. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that about how much time you get out of it too. Like that's how I think about whether or not something is worth, let's say, $20.
Yeah.
When you have something like a movie, you pay for a movie, or you watch it in theater, whatever it is, you get like 3 hours tops for a long one.
Yep.
But you have games where you're getting days, weeks, hundreds of hours at minimum for some of these games.
Sure.
Why wouldn't you kick a little support back up?
Yeah.
But of course, that's me. That's
you
my
guys were
bias,
literally
because I'm
talking
on
the
other end of it,
opposite
putting
thing at the
time
beginning of
back
the
into
podcast. Just
developing it.
FYI.
Like we're saying earlier, if there's so many free alternatives,
That's the thing, right? What is it? 79,000 registered users, 2,000 active players, and yet they struggle to raise donations. Why wouldn't people kick stuff towards the developers? I don't know, but clearly it's not happening there, right? It's not as easy as we make it seem here, right? That now it's like, anyway. Yes, this is a wonderful argument and a frustrating argument for game developers. This is why, like, anything around this idea of money is frustrating as hell, and why personally I would like to take and not have this conversation so often. So I'm willing to not put monetization at all in the games. No ads, no microtransactions, and hopefully have a good game experience and people can fund the game, fund the development studio. But yeah, there's a lot here with how to ask people to fund an indie game.
It doesn't quite work out that way all the time.
Yeah.
All right, I think should we wrap it up here? You guys got anything else you wanted to hit up?
Yeah, it sounds pretty good.
All right. Well, this was super exciting. I'm looking forward to listening back on the edit.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I think these guys did a great job.
Up one day early for the Patreon subscribers. Everyone who's already subscribed, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. If you haven't yet, it's at patreon.com/PBBG.
There you go.
This episode will be up one day early, and then it will go up on YouTube and the podcasting platforms after that.
And also, if you sub to our Patreon, you get a whole bunch of benefits of being part of a special super secret Discord group where you get sneak peek into the testing of stuff. I don't know. Trying to sell it, right?
Yeah, upsell it.
That sounds good.
A little behind the scenes, right? Like, You get to help build a community, be a part of it. You can, give feedback that's listened to a little more carefully. So yeah,
sure. Yeah, no, seriously though, we have a small group in there already, and we're not just talking about the podcast. We're kicking ideas around improving the Discord and just general improving the situation and seeing how it goes from there. So yeah, that is there for you. There's a members only Discord channel for those who decide to join.
So I'm just going to point out, right? They've upsold a subscription. For a flat fee, you can be part of a community. You get the special this, you get the special that. We're going to listen to you. You can help shape the Discord and the podcast and whatever. That feels interesting, right? And I should probably subscribe to that. And the reason why it feels interesting and worth the money is that I know everyone that buys into this is going to be on the same footing, right? We're all part of the same topic, the same. We're all equal within this Patreon group. The reason why the microtransaction model is so divisive is, now imagine if the top spender got to weigh in the most. You spend $100 a month, you can decide what the topic of the podcast is going to be. For $200, you can decide who gets to be in the podcast. For $300, you could, this is what it challenges the integrity of whatever it is you're putting together. When you bring in those that have the greatest amount of money, get the greatest voice and vote. That is why this topic is so difficult and why there are so many strong opinions. So imagine, let's just pick apart this podcast. Let's just chop it up and sell it to the highest bidder. How does that make you feel as a podcaster? How does that make you feel as an artist, as someone putting together content, if you're just for everything for sale? Now translate that to your game, right? And I guess that is the pitch I'm making. Some people view games as a business, other views as art. I view games as my way to do storytelling. I come from decades of running Dungeons and Dragons as a dungeon master. I create all my own campaigns, and now this is my creative outlet, right? So the microtransactions, the way the model works to do microtransactions well is to basically sell your game to the highest bidder, right? It's to find the whales. If that's not it, then I don't know that that's an interesting model. But for the most part, it's those with the most amount of money, those with the largest wallet get the most amount of winning. And so, right, here it's just, hey, if you subscribe for X amount of dollars, we can all be part of the same community equally, right? And you can feel like, yes, I'm responsible for this podcast. I'm responsible for this Discord, for this site. I help fund it. We're all at the same level. No one has a greater voice than me just because of their financial situation. That's what I wish we talked a little bit more about in game development, and what you're willing to risk with your artistic voice and creativity when it comes to this, and what the monetization does to that. There's plenty of game developers out there that absolutely don't care. They're putting this together as a business. It's a digital slot machine, or it's something for a certain amount of entertainment, sure, but they're not developing a relationship with their audience the way more indie game devs do. So that's what I'll say on that. I think, yeah, there's a reason, yeah. Here, let me just see. There's 10 more seconds, 15 more seconds.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for making it out today, and we'll
everyone should sub to this.
What the community chooses for the next topic.
Sounds good.
Join the Discord.
Sounds good.
See you guys.
Awesome. So thanks. That was an hour podcast. This video is 3 hours. I was thinking I'd only add 30 minutes of content. I added 2 hours of content, so whatever, forgive me. I have opinions and I like to talk about it. For disclosure, I watched this video 3 times. The first time through because I saw it in monetization, and because of Slyboots Studio, I have a certain angle on and opinion on that. The second time through I watched it was to take notes because I know I wanted to respond. I did ask the podcasters, Fuhan Pai, if I could do this, if I could use his content to make a video and to stream it. He said say yes. So that's why I went ahead and did this. Otherwise, I guess I would have had to find a less ideal way to do this, where it was just me talking. But this was really helpful to be able to pause and stuff like that. So thanks for letting me do that. Again, this is 3 developers. They have their games. They have their opinions. No one's wrong. No one's right. But it is about, if we're artists or businessmen, what is the experience you are crafting, and are you comfortable with that, right? What are you willing to sacrifice in the integrity of your games or your user experience? And users, what are you expecting or not expecting? And it's not to say players are always right? If they're expecting something that isn't the reality, they're going to be disappointed, and they should probably not have that expectation. So anyways, this was interesting and fun. So thanks for those that watched. Yeah, and everyone's time is precious, so you giving even this video, or stream or whatever, 3 hours of your attention, I really appreciate that as well. If you're interested in my Patreon in my site, definitely go to slyboots.studio. I'll say, don't contribute necessarily to the Patreon until we have something that you can actually play. I want you to feel comfortable with where your money's going. But we do have a Discord. We do show screenshots of our games that are in development, and our business model, our mission statement there. We're not looking to put anything in the we don't want to put anything in the game that would compromise your ability to immerse yourself into the story that we're trying to sell. It's not to say that there isn't any revenue at any point. Maybe there'll be buy to play, maybe there'll be expansions, maybe there'll be fundraisers the way like Wikipedia does theirs. But yeah, so I think this is good. I didn't watch the first one here, and my last bit of feedback too is just a little bit more information on who the developers are, right? Because this is my experience. I didn't listen to the first one. I don't know if they introduced themselves in the first one, but I'm coming into the second one because I'm interested in the topic of game monetization. It'd be interesting to know, what specifically these devs have worked on. Why are they on the podcast? What makes them folks we should listen to on this topic? So this was really good. Yeah, it's been in my head the last couple days about this particular thing, and yeah, there's just a lot here to unpack. Unfortunately, many of the PBBGs I've played, most of them I would say are pay to win, and I totally get it. I am comfortable playing a pay to win game, right, for the same thing that these devs have mentioned. I get it for free. I get it for free, and someone else is footing the bill. I think the last game I actually paid full price for, I played it once and then never returned to it. I wanted to. The game was great, but I never returned to it. I don't have buyer's remorse. I'm happy that the money went to the game studio, and that's what I look for. But yeah, let's see. We have a couple of. Okay. Just caught some of this great feedback. Okay, that's for Fuan Pai. You just caught my response. Solid commentary. Great. I'm glad you like it. Great. Thanks for the stream. Made some great points. Cool. Thanks for watching it. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to money and your player experience. So I'd really like the questions. And this is what I would say for another stream where you guys, another podcast where you're talking to devs. I love the question that was like, if you were to design a monetization system, what would it be? If you were to design X, what would it be? And have that a little bit more of like, hey, this is what I do in my game, or this is what I would hypothetically do. One of the challenges with the games you guys are making is they are long-term games, long-term titles. And once you put that strategy in place, once you put that monetization in place, that economy, that game loop in place, it's an MMO. Like, that thing does not shift, as opposed to, like, Rinzai and I are working on Dura, which is a single-player version of Pyroclasm. We wanted to reduce the scope. It's a single-player mobile and web game. Yes, it is an idle game, but maybe it has, like, I don't know, 20, 30 hours, or whatever, a small amount of hours compared to what I'm doing in Elithor and Queslar and stuff like that. But then I can just leave it, right? We're designing this particular game. It's a one little title, and then we're done. Yeah, maybe we'll maintain it. Maybe we'll expand some content. But once that thing's shipped, I can move on to another title where I can change around the balance, or maybe this one's going to be buy to play or something like that. I think one of the big challenges with these titles that are meant to last for such a long time, having that business plan in place, or realizing how rigid your system is, how flexible, like you were talking about, like the imperial conflict, where or with Elithor, where can I add monetization features in here, right? And that's tough on these games that go on for such a long time. You have to release a second title or a third title or whatever to increase your revenue stream, or to explore completely new streams, as opposed to folks that just do single player titles. Ultimately, at Slyboots, we want to do, I want to do a multiplayer game. I want to, something like Pyroclasm, or my own version of, stuff like this. But for me, it's going to take time to build up to that, because it is such a large endeavor. So anyway, thanks. That's going to be it for the stream. See you guys later. I do tend to stream now and then on game dev stuff, so feel free to, on Twitch, do the subscribe. This video will be up on YouTube. Hit me up there. Just talk about, especially, I love talking about this. The Bartle test. From 30 years ago, from the grandfather of, MUDs and online gaming, multiplayer gaming, breaking folks down into their different their different archetypes here for player motivation. I think this introduces something really fascinating whenever you talk about game design and monetization, because there's no one size fits all. Everyone fits somewhere on this spectrum, and so it's very helpful to keep that in mind. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for your time, and see everyone later.